Okay.
Whew. Ready?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Izzy.
And I'm Jessica.
And welcome back to our special episode of
The
Greatest
Greatest
Genre.
Genre.
Oh my gosh. If you are here for the first time, welcome. We are so happy to have you. I don't know why you are here. In fact, I would recommend that you exit immediately.
By here, she meant this particular episode, not our podcast as a whole.
Oh, yes. Please see season 1, episode 1, if you would like to commence your journey. If you are a repeat listener, welcome back. We are so happy that you're here. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute, and I think we've all been going through the same tumultuous 4 weeks.
It has been a roller coaster,
To say the least.
to say the least. We have finally emerged from our month-long decompression of
Yes.
the events of HOFAS.
Yes, we spent a lot of time just sort of emoting to each other and processing everything that we experienced during this read, and we decided to spare you the majority of that.
Yeah, no, we needed to collect ourselves.
Collect ourselves, our thoughts,
But
pick everything back up.
it was a core memory for both of us, and we can't wait to share our overall feelings with you.
Yes, we will. We thought that would be a nice note to sort of end this episode on, so we will be speaking very fondly about what that experience has meant to both of us reading this book.
We are going to try and keep this episode under 2 hours.
We will try now, and
Keyword
we will
being
also try
attempt.
when we edit. So we will try twice over.
We will start with the literal journey of our first 36 hours at that midnight release. Following that, we will discuss our predictions and if they were correct or incorrect. There is a tallying system that
Yes,
Jessica has
we
put together
will
for
be
us.
keeping score unofficially.
We will go through our peaks and valleys, our grapes and raisins, and we will finish out with our final overall thoughts and hopes and fears for upcoming releases, whenever those may be.
Looking forward into the vast unknown. It is.
I don't even know how many more books. Everything's a crapshoot at this point.
It is. I think it's a very pivotal point for a lot of fans of Sarah's because she's gotten so many new fans, I think, over the last 2 years, which is when we had the last book.
Exactly.
And so I think for a vast majority of this fandom, this is a new experience, more or less, for us to just sort of really have no...
And we are going to be
what to
here with you
expect.
every step of the way.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere. We will be continuing our rereads, and we'll have more information very soon about what is going to be in the upcoming seasons of the greatest genre.
The greatest genre.
So lots to look forward to.
An obvious spoiler warning, just to start things off. This is...
In case the episode title HOFAS Reactions wasn't enough of a clue, I do think we should be very clear.
Abundantly.
Very clear.
Please exit.
Spoilers for everything. Spoilers for the entire Massverse.
Nothing is off the table.
Nothing. Everything is fair game. There are going to be spoilers basically every 30 seconds.
As always, a reminder to keep things kind in the comments. We love this community. We love interacting with everyone. We can all disagree while being respectful of one another. I'm going to give you guys...
say that so nicely.
Oh,
I
thank
love
you.
it. I love that you've just...
That's my thing now.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you guys a quick March update. As you can see... Flips hair.
As you can see, and if you can't see, then you should absolutely subscribe to our YouTube channel because then you can see these very cozy,
They are
brand new,
crew neck sweatshirts.
right, crew neck sweatshirts.
And I went with the softer ones. Because,
They're very soft.
Yeah, they're like the Gildan.
I love.
Whatever it's called. I mean, you've all been to customink.com. Like that is how this happened.
Yeah,
And
these are nice.
yeah, so we have all sizes. We have a limited number of them. I am trying to figure out how to separate my personal Etsy from the greatest genre Etsy. So for now, if you would like one immediately, please shoot us a DM. We do look at all of our DMs. Email us. We will get one sent to you as I figure out the trials and tribulations of the Etsy back end. We are going to plug the handles real quick. Oh, and we have t-shirts, by the way.
We have t-shirts and sweatshirts.
And sweatshirts. So you can have either. If you live in, a sunny place and a crew neck just isn't your thing.
Spring is coming.
Yeah. So we're going to plug the handles. We're on Instagram at _greatest genre, on Twitter at greatest genre. We are on TikTok at the greatest genre. Email us at, you guessed it, thegreatestgenre@gmail.com.
Yes, please do. we know that we have all been going through it, and we are here for you. So, especially after this episode, if you have different opinions about some of the parts of the book than we do,
sure.
we would love to hear from you.
Who knows? Maybe there will be a reaction episode part 2 if
Absolutely.
enough of you respond.
I mean, I would love to do, I don't know about you, but I would love to do more of a deep dive into this book eventually.
No, these are a high-level reactions.
I think for today,
main
it
takeaways.
really is more, it's a little bit more emotional. It's a little bit the highlights and the takeaways and just kind of our first fully baked reaction points.
Couldn't agree more. So, Jessica, on that note,
yes, Isabel,
should we go into Midgard?
Into Midgard, through the rift.
And perhaps, like, into the depth charger, into the ocean.
Also, into the prison, out
caves,
of the prison, through the mists of Avalon.
Hitting up Avalon.
We're going to be on almost every map that SJM has given us. We'll be there.
Yeah, for sure. And let's go into our House of Flame and Shadow deep dive.
The deep dive.
The deep dive.
Except we just said it's not a deep dive.
It's a reaction episode with elements of deep dive.
Okay, so here come the feelings, guys. We'll just jump right into them.
Should we start with all, like, what physically happened the first 36 hours that book was released and how?
And also the 12 hours before.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, great.
So it was a dark and stormy night.
It was almost exactly a month ago. 4 weeks, 30 days.
It was January 29th.
It was January 29th, about 4 p.m.?
I think we ended up getting there at like 5. Yeah, we did a gym workout before we went to Kramer's.
6 p.m., something like that. And we walked to our local bookstore, Kramer's. Shout out to our DC listeners. We went to Kramer's and begged.
Quite literally begged
the staff to let us hold in our mere mortal hands this book. But hold.
Guys, we had no chill.
It was a
borderline
little
embarrassing.
It was a little pathetic. But
we'll post a picture on our socials of the face of the man at Kramer Books at the front desk looking at Jessica with what can only be described as
It was a little bit of pity.
And pity, I think.
It was a little bit of pity. But I mean, mostly truly kindness. They were very kind to us. They said, do you want to hold it?
And immediately we're like, yes.
And I was like, yes.
And then they went into a secret room hidden by a bookshelf.
Yeah. Again, for the DC residents, there is a secret room where they keep unreleased stock, and it is behind a secret bookshelf. I just feel like everybody in DC should know that. Also, at Kramer's, if you end up listening to this and you didn't want people to know about that, I do apologize. I'm very sorry.
We're in a highly emotional state. We can't be held accountable.
I can't be held accountable for the things that I say that pertain to the House of Flame and Shadow.
Precisely.
So, anyway, so then we went home after lingering in Kramer's at the cafe and watching all of the other SJM fans secretly walk in and out. I think they were having the same idea that we had, which was maybe they're putting them out early.
Yeah, and they super were not. Like, the first thing they said when we went out, we were like, do you have the book? And they were like, yes, we cannot give it to you until tomorrow. And we're like, what? Like, so you have it in the store.
But they're here.
And that went back and forth for like a few
minutes. And at that
minutes.
point, they finally said, do you want to hold it?
To which we obviously said yes. And so we went home.
Fine. The whole thing was fine.
The whole thing was great. It was a positive experience overall. We went home separately.
Yes.
We sat there at midnight.
I started watching The Crown from the beginning because I literally didn't know what to do with myself. Those were the longest hours I've experienced in a long time. I did my nails. Like, I gave myself a full manicure.
I was really lucky. I had a Zoom with some of my girlfriends from California. And so up until 11:45, I was occupado.
It was agony.
But 12 o'clock came and it did not automatically download onto our Kindles until 12:09 for me.
I was going to say 8 minutes of fraught distress. Rapid fire texting between the two of us and our dear
shout out Emily Galt.
#1 SJM fan, Emily Galt. Who will at some point hopefully be making a cameo on this podcast.
She has to. And then I think our first prediction, Isabel's, was correct. It was indeed a 4 a.m.er
She
that
did.
night.
She predicted 4 a.m. I said 2 a.m. Isabel predicted 4 a.m. and she was right on the nose. I did not get to bed until 4 a.m.
I stopped at 3:46. I think that by the time I had brushed my teeth, gotten into bed, I received a text from you at 4:06 a.m. saying, all right, I'm tapping out. Emily finished part 1.
I also finished part 1.
Oh, shit. Oh, sorry. Are we allowed to swear? It's fine.
I'm rusty. Warning, there will be adult content on this podcast.
And then we came into the office, both of us, about an hour late the next morning.
It was a very tough wake up.
It was not our most productive day.
4 hours of sleep.
In fact, I actually cried at one point at the office because I was so overwhelmed.
I'm going to fully fess up to you now. I lied to you all day. I was reading on my phone basically the entire day.
And you're giving this to me live.
I feel like you knew.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But my strategy, the only reason I'm saying it's okay is because my strategy worked. Because I know how much of a faster reader you are than me.
And we did sync up. We finished the final thing within 5 minutes of each other.
Within like 5 minutes of each other. And you did overtake me at the end, which I was always kind of like planning for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, I'm cool with it. We're all good.
And I was just so terrified that you were going to like lap me and get so far ahead of me that I was going to feel, that we were going to be out of sync. Okay, no, that's totally fair.
Now, we were told to just leave at about 3:30. Our bosses looked at us and said, girls, go down to the gym, get a workout in, go home, go read. You two are useless today. To which we said, thank you, and promptly left.
To great bosses, who are both women, by the way.
Obviously. We went home, we made some dinner, and we sat there on my sofa and we read until about midnight.
I think we finished part 2.
Yeah. And then we obviously giggled about it in bed for about an hour afterwards.
And we were up until like 10 or 11. I think we were in bed by like 11:30.
I think we were in bed
also, for those of you who might be wondering, I did sleep at Isabel's apartment. We left work. I had packed an overnight bag. We left the office. We came straight to Isabel's house. And we read here, went to bed. I slept here. We woke up the next morning.
We were on PTO.
We took Wednesday
off. And we've read pretty much from 9 a.m. when we woke up. We read until 2 o'clock where I made the decision and dragged Jessica along with me, and you are a trooper. You were not happy about it. My football team was playing Liverpool. We went to Exiles, took a break, and then we came back. We were done.
Her football team was playing my football team. And Isabel is a better, stronger, deeper fan than I am because I was like, I don't care. I'm a little nervous to say that, but it's true.
It's okay. No.
At the time.
And if there was anything that you should not care for, it was because of this. And we came back home. We were done by 7, and there was screaming, there was crying, there were peaks and valleys.
There were peaks and valleys, grapes and raisins. I don't know. Once we get to that section, I'll clarify.
I know, because I was thinking ebbs and flows, but I'm not really sure in which direction ebbs and flows are.
I think peaks and valleys are probably roses and thorns.
Love.
Oh, that's what we should have called it.
Stupid. Fat hobbit. Oh my god. And on that note, that leads us into the first part of this episode.
So for those of you, since you all asked for an hour by hour recounting of our entire read of House of Flame and Shadow, there you have it. What a segue into our prediction tally. So the last time we were all here together, we made some predictions about what we thought was coming for us.
It was a really fun episode.
During the House of Flame and Shadow read. Mm-hmm. There's no way we could have possibly known what was in store for us, but we did have some decent instincts.
Jessica, I think that we did okay.
I think we did
All
okay.
All things considered. Knowing what Sarah does to her readers, I think that we got more than our fair share.
And this was my first time really feeling like going into a new book, I had real solid ground to make predictions from. Like, I was pretty confident going into this read that I had, like, cracked it, you know?
Spoiler. She was wrong.
I mean, listen, this tally humbled me when I went back through for the first time. But we did. There were some things that we got that I am proud of. So, first of all, Isabel's prediction, obviously, that night 1 was a 4 a.m.er. The other prediction, so the next prediction, actually, was And this was like, we thought this was like our big prediction that was going to be like the big reveal of the whole book.
And then it was.
And it literally happened in the first.
It was like the first 200 pages.
First 200 pages.
Yeah.
Anyways, in the first 200 pages of the book, it was confirmed that the Daglin equal the Asteri.
Now we have some asterisks.
We do have a tiny asterisk there because
Vesperus, when she is killed,
the Asteri, who is buried under the prison.
Yes, in Prythian.
In Prythian, but this is after we get the hologram from Selene, and we'll talk about the hologram later on in our Peaks and Valleys segment. But this is after we get the reveal.
Yeah.
Right? Because Amren is really the first one who says,
the Daglin.
We did have them in our world.
They were known
but we
as the
called them by
Daglin.
a different name.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when I read that, I was like, yes! And then I was also like, wow.
That was really quickly.
There's so much more to have. I'm so scared.
There are still a straight 700 pages left.
So we think, it seems that we were correct about that. There is a tiny asterisk because when Vesperus is stabbed by Ataraxia, she bleeds black blood. And at the end of the book, in the final battle back in Midgard, when Bryce kills...
Is it Rigulus or is it someone else?
No, it's a female Asteri that Bryce kills. And I can't remember her...
Was it Hesperus?
I can't remember her name.
I think it might have been
Hesperus. Remember her name.
Well, whatever. And you went back and you checked this.
She bleeds red. It says red blood spewed everywhere. And I went back and reread it because I wanted to be sure. I have gone back and reread both of these death scenes. Vesperus in Prythian bled black, and the Asteri that Bryce killed bled red.
I think it's bled blue.
Bled red. So...
And obviously there are connotations as to like what black versus red blood mean throughout the entire Master.
So black blood in the whole Throne of Glass series becomes a very clear signifier of Valg.
Yes.
The Valg bleed black. That is a signature of their species. So there is a tiny asterisk here because these two species, which are supposedly
allegedly the same,
have different colored blood. Mm-hmm. So thrown a little asterisk there. Also... could just be an exciting little thread to see if Sarah's, just checking to see if we're paying attention. But on the surface, Amren did confirm that the Asteri were in their world and they were known as the Daglin. So I'm giving us that point.
I agree.
Point to Izzy and Jessica. Prediction 2. And this was really my prediction, so I'll take the L for this one.
No. We're in this together.
The Dread Trove was created by Prythian Fae to defeat the Daglin. That was wrong.
Yeah.
The Dread Trove was actually created by the Daglin. And that was an interesting turn for me. I'm actually kind of like, I'm not mad about
being not at all.
About that. I think that makes it almost a little bit more interesting that these objects were not created by Fae, but that Fae are able to wield them.
Yeah, for sure.
And we also learned that the cauldron was actually something that they didn't create.
It was created in Prythian.
It was of Prythian, but they warped it.
It's kind of like what...
They kind of bastardized it.
Well, it's kind of what the Fae did to the Trove.
Yes.
The Asteri did to the cauldron.
Almost like a reverse or like a mirror. Oh, that's a great point. I love that. So that was a wrong.
Yeah, but like an exciting wrong.
Yes, but we do not get no points.
No points for Izzy and Jessica.
No points for Izzy and Jessica. Prediction 3, Queen Taya was married to King Finn. Point to us. We were correct. We then also predicted that Peleus killed King Finn. I'm going to round up on this one and give us a point because he was very complicit. He may not have done it by his own hand, but he and Taya engineered Finn's death.
For sure.
By what we're pretty sure is actually the Kelpie.
Which is interesting. And then Bryce, when she was looking at the hologram image, she was like, it looks very similar to the knock that showed up in Earth and Blood.
Ew.
Yeah, big ick. Ew. But we met the Kelpie. We don't know if it's the same one. We know there was a finite number of them in the world. But
sounds a lot like the nasty one that tried to kill Nesta.
Sure does. He was dragged under.
Mm-hmm. It would also make sense if he had the mask on him when he died.
Yeah.
That's why it was still down there in the bog.
But interesting that the mask stayed down there and the and Truth Teller came back up.
Right, because we think that Truth
Teller was on Finn when he died. It belonged to Annihilus.
Oh, wait, he had both blades when he died. The Kelpie brought it back.
The Kelpie brought it back. Oh, we don't know if it was a Kelpie, but we think it was a Kelpie.
The creature that pulled Finn down into the bog afterwards, Bryce sees Taya and Peleus are standing on the bank, and it's actually very Arthurian. So the dagger gets chucked out of the water.
Excellent use of the word chucked.
The sword is sort of raised with a hand out of the water. It's very Lady of the Lake.
Yeah.
But creepy and gross.
Yeah.
That was Gwydion.
Yes.
Because Finn carried both blades on him, I think, pretty much all the time.
Yeah. Until his death.
Yes. All that to say, we're rounding up and giving ourselves a point.
Generously.
Prediction 4 is that... Actually, we're not counting anymore. Prediction, next, is that Taya took the entire trove to Prythian and that the horn is part of the trove. I'm going to give us this. I agree. I think she technically only took the harp and the horn with her.
Yeah. But we were correct in the fact that the horn was totally part of the trove.
The horn is absolutely part of the trove. Taya brought the harp and the horn with her. It's what she used to open the portal to cross into the world. And she kept them hidden in a pocket of nothingness while she was there to keep it safe from anybody else.
Mm-hmm. That was your first hit on the microphone.
We knew it was going to get away with it. It's so close.
And she did this on purpose because she knew that all those objects united could be disastrous should they reach the hands of the Asteri. You'll remember that in Court of Silver Flames, when Nesta received the image from Lanthes, that there was a shadowy object, and the fandom was correct. That was indeed the horn.
Yes, which is really fun.
It was awesome.
That one was a fun one to have confirmed, just as much as the other one was fun to be debunked. It was fun to have that one confirmed too. Our other prediction was that the High King and Queen ruled from the Dusk Court, which became the prison. Again, we're generously rounding up. The prison did used to be the Dusk Court, but it was really only Taya's seat of power because of her magic. She was sort of the evening star.
And she was a world walker. We know that world walkers are attracted to thin places and that their powers are extra strong there. So it would make sense that was her seat of power.
Yes.
We don't know, to your point, where High King where his seat of power was.
Prediction from us that Adis and Taya had a love child. Sadly, I think that's a no.
I know, but I'm going to pull out your quote that you said to me yesterday. You can't prove to me that it didn't happen. It's like mermaids. You can't prove that they don't exist.
You can't?
I mean, I would have loved that too. But we were correct, point to Izzy and Jessica, that Taya and Adis were mates.
They were mates. And that was your prediction from the beginning. You called that way early on. As soon as you said it to me, I was like, oh my God, yes, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But that one was an interesting one to see unfold. The story of their relationship is not what I thought it was going to be. Taya herself as a character is nowhere near what I thought she was going to be.
Same.
And we can get into that.
Definitely.
We're going to get into that in a little bit later. On the whole, unfortunately,
I believe we were
incorrect.
Yes.
So, no points.
Oh, this next one's rough, especially for Izzy.
Especially for me, too. You and me really got on board with this idea that Lydia was secretly the daughter of the King of Avalon.
And it's interesting
because the King of Avalon was a stag shifter, even though he's very clearly fae.
And SJM told us multiple times throughout both books that the King of Avalon sucks. Avalon is a place where they oppress women. And we were like, it's a lie. She's gaslighting us. Avalon is totally like a stronghold of the rebellion.
She was very clear, and she did not lie.
She told the truth.
Avalon was everything that everybody said that it was, and we were Delulu.
Just so wrong.
So wrong about everything having to do with Morven and Avalon and some other things that we're going to get to very shortly.
Yeah, and speaking of dickhead fae males.
Yeah, so wrong. Wrong to Izzy and Jessica. 0. No. On a similar note, I really was a staunch believer we were going to find out that Rune is not the son of the Autumn King. That is apparently actually true. That he is the son of the Autumn King.
Again,
but I'm pulling
thing.
the mermaid. I'm pulling the mermaid asterisk and say we haven't seen a paternity test. So I'm not willing to give up on it completely, but I do acknowledge that there's like a 4% chance that I might still be right.
And just speaking of the Autumn King in general, I really...
that's the next one.
Oh, yeah.
We also predicted that we were going to find out that the King of Avalon is actually a really good guy and is a big player in the rebellion. He might not be a big player, but that was a big wrong.
Big wrong.
A big wrong for both of us. We both looked at each other at one point. Well, we all know the point. After they both died, and we were like, wow.
We were just so incorrect.
Way off.
I really thought because...
I know. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, we're almost done.
Oh, this I'm gonna
do.
Hold on,
I'm gonna do a correct one for us.
Okay,
I'm gonna do a couple because we just did a couple.
We just did a couple incorrects.
Wrongs.
Okay, thank you.
So, shifters came from the Tog world.
Huge
correct, and it was so sick finding that out.
Oh my god,
it was so fun.
One of the joys.
It was great.
Yeah,
having that one confirmed was amazing, and I thought she did it
beautifully,
very subtly,
and she
didn't
respected
spell it out for us.
No, and she respected the Throne of Glass world and that was a completed series and didn't bring it back to life in any kind of obvious way. It was subtle. It was beautiful. She gave us just enough that it was a gift to the readers.
It was exciting,
yeah,
because the scene itself where it was happening in the hologram, it was about something else, and Bryce seeing this flash of Faye that sort of look like her but also aren't quite like her, right? The scene is about something else.
Yeah.
But that piece of it meant something to us.
Exactly.
And I have goosebumps.
And it didn't mean the same thing to Bryce and Nesta and Azrael that it meant to the reader.
Which is always really cool when an author gives you moments like that.
No, I love that point.
So that was really fun. Mm-hmm. That was really fun to read. And then prediction that Jessica is way older than she claims. Correct.
That
might be the most correct prediction we made the entire time.
Yeah, there was just no way. She gave us enough clues that there was no way that was true. Yeah. She says she's 400. She lied.
No, she lied. Jessica was great. More to come on Jessica in our discussion.
We're just gonna top off right here.
And speaking of grapes and raisins,
more grapes for you, Jessica.
Yes, please. We have 2 more predictions. They're both wrong, and I think these are the ones that we're particularly sad about.
Yeah.
This was All right, I'm just gonna say it because it's hard.
Just rip off the Band-Aid.
The prediction was that Hunt's dad is going to be revealed to be Thur. This is wrong, and my exact note is that we hates it.
Can you tell we both recently watched Lord of the Rings?
Hates it. And I'm actually not even going to get into it because we do have
some notes about this.
We have some notes about it later on in the episode, and I think that's the more appropriate place to talk about it. And also, it's just very upsetting. So, our final prediction, which was also wrong. And this is perhaps the most laughably wrong. And I was so proud of myself when I came up with this. I really was like, I've nailed it. Sarah is not going to know. Sarah's never going to think somebody is going to be able to predict this. I was so sure that we were getting teed up for Sigrid, the Alpha Fendir, becoming the leader, becoming an alpha, becoming a leader of the reborn pack of devils. Mm-hmm. Ethan would be her second. I was like, that is poetic as fuck. It's gonna happen.
And it's super
could I not have
pretty
been
quickly in the book.
Yikes.
That was a tough one.
And it really kept stringing me along because Ethan killed her, and then he was gonna bring her back, and then she turned into a Reaper, and then he was gonna save her from being a Reaper, and now we've left it. It's just...
Yeah.
And he's Alpha, and he's Prime. Anyways, so that brings us to the end of our predictions. If you were keeping score, let us know how we did, because I can't bring myself to actually tally it up. And if not, thank you for being supportive.
Thank you for being here with us today.
Okay, so moving forward.
Going to shift?
We're going to move into we were trying to figure out the best way for us to sort of guide the discussion through our feeling. Like how to distill all of our feelings and thoughts about this book at a high level. I presented to Isabel the concept of grapes and raisins. Which is basically
roses and thorns.
We're going to call it the roses and thorns section of this podcast episode for obvious branding reasons. But essentially the concept, if you're not familiar of this, is something that was really great and then something that was not so great.
Yeah.
So we're going to try and balance our discussion here between moments in this book that we absolutely loved and were stunned by and blown away by, and maybe some moments in
left
the book.
a little something to be desired.
Exactly.
So we'll start it off
with,
please. I would love to go first. And we're going to do it fairly linearly.
We tried to just sort of start at the beginning generally and work our way through. Some of them might be slightly out of order because we also tried to pair our roses and thorns
like in the same subject
matter together.
But some of them will be more thematic, and that's okay. And we're just going to kind of let it go where it goes. So
we're just going to trust you to keep up.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the entire book, and I'm sure that many people in the fandom will agree, is just being back in Prythian, being with Bryce and Nesta and Asriel, and these books that we fell in love with, and having those worlds collide. It was a little bit longer than I expected them all to be together. We had almost a third of the book where Bryce was in Prythian. Now, one of your notes I know later is that we didn't get to see that much of Prythian, but for me, it made sense, the locations that they did end up in. It was also so great to see characters from earlier on. The Midgard worm made an appearance. I guess these were part of the creatures that the Asteri created as the stuff that they hunted, and most of them were put in the middle, and I guess a couple of them eluded the Fae that put them there.
I don't understand why anybody would ever create a creature like the Midgard worm.
It was pretty fucking disgusting. It was so fun to see part of the Dread Trove in action again.
I don't know why, but I was not expecting to see. I kind of felt like she had sort of hung it up at the end of Silver Flames. I don't know about you, but I kind of got that sense that she had sort of
Silver Flames had the same energy to me as Aquawar, where it felt like the conclusion in a certain part of the story.
A piece of the story, absolutely.
And she gaslit us. She brought the Dread Trove back, and to me it made sense.
Nesta just wielded it like it was nothing.
Yeah, and what was really fun for me, and you guys know at this point that I'm a massive Nesta girly, not unlike Jessica and Aelin Ashriver.
Whitethorn,
Galanthinius. So it was just so fun for me to see a good portion of this book with Nesta in it, and watching her put on that mask once again, and she's in so much more command of her power than she was in Silver Flames.
I was going to say, that was very cool to see Nesta just so confident in her skin and in herself and in this new existence
and she
had been struggling with for a long time.
Totally.
She's really come into herself.
And I love the friendship that she's created with Asriel too.
Yeah, some people had notes about that. Some people were like, where did this come from? There's no foundation for this. But like their time has passed.
Yeah.
And they've all been living together, and Nesta has really decided to embrace her role as part of this family.
And let's not forget that Nesta, along with Gwyn and Emery, won the blood right.
If that doesn't earn you some camaraderie with the Illyrian commanders, I don't know what does. They are now part of a very elite club.
Yeah, elite faction of the Illyrian crew.
Club.
But more than that, I loved the relationship that Bryce and Nesta kind of, even though it was in its very early stages that they formed, it made sense to me that there was a lot of tension at the beginning, and they don't fully trust each other even at the end of this, but there is an underlying level of respect from both these characters that they have with each other, and that was really fun to read about.
It was.
And it was fun to see elements of Midgard make it into Prythian with Bryce playing the different genres of music on her phone. I loved that.
I will say, that bonus chapter, I think that was the best bonus chapter.
The Bryce, Asriel, Nesta one?
Yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of them, to be honest with you.
I am such a simp for Rune and Lydia. We'll get into that in a minute. But I will admit, the Bryce, Nesta, and Asriel bonus chapter, I think, was the best one. And I think it really gives us a window into
what could come down the line.
What's coming down the line. I think this sequence, from an author's perspective, was just as much about Asriel as it was actually moving along the plot of HOFAS.
Love that point.
Because, and everybody's joking about this because it is true.
It's so true.
Asriel says more words in the first 200 pages, 200 or 300 pages of HOFAS than he has in like basically all of the ACOTAR books put together.
You are 100% correct.
And that was really cool.
Absolutely.
I felt like, I almost felt like I was meeting him for the first time again.
Yeah.
Which was very fun, and it made me really excited to go back into the world of ACOTAR, which we're also going to talk about a little bit later. But I agree with you. I think all of these scenes with the three of them in the caves on this quest, I thought they were gripping. They were super interesting. I was very stressed.
Yeah, we need to just take a minute for the normal formula of a Sarah J. Maas novel was not followed in this book.
No. Instead of the last 200 pages being like total and utter chaos,
which by the way, they were.
This time, we got a sandwich. We got a chaos sandwich. That is how I'm going to describe HOFAS in my review. A chaos sandwich in, like, a really great way.
Yeah.
Because it was crazy, intense, insane.
That was actually not a fun night, that first 4 a.m. No. Because it was just stress. I mean, it was in the best way.
And there were many layers of stress.
For sure.
Because the most stress for me was happening back in Midgard, because this is when we're getting all of the horrendous, horrible torture scenes
with Hunt and Rune and Baxian,
and it was worse than Aelin in the box.
Oh yeah, we got more detail,
and so we had that going on, and then Bryce is just stuck in the tunnels. And it was just really a lot. And there was the stress of knowing we had to go to work and it was becoming 1 a.m.
And 2 a.m. And 3 a.m. Yeah. One more little tiny thing I wanted to note about my favorite moments with Bryce, Nesta, and Asriel. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about the thorn of this trio, which was the information download from Celine and particularly the hologram. But one moment from that I really did love was that we found out that Truth Teller, Asriel's dagger, came from an alias, which is the... And
also, please, if you have information about pronunciation of that, please let us know, because I was saying Enalius,
but that's the
and
Greek
based on the spelling, I don't think that's correct. So we're going with Enalius for now, but please help us.
Feel free to correct us. Yeah.
No, because you and I are on the same page that as a whole, and as anyone who has listened to this podcast knows, I cannot stand context for context's sake in a novel ever.
And this was the first time I feel like we really got that.
There was it was just a little bit. It wasn't fully, because it was information that our characters did not have, right? It wasn't as bad as a character walking around recounting the history of their world to themselves on their walk.
So to be clear, we've entered the thorn.
Yes, this is the thorn of this rose.
It was the hologram for me.
You, it was the hologram, and I don't disagree. The hologram felt a little out of place. It felt a little more Star Wars. It would have almost made more sense to me if they had encountered a hologram in Midgard.
Yeah, that actually would have been fine with me.
But the fact that they encountered it in Prithian...
And even though, by the way, it came from Midgard, this was 15,000 years ago. The technology was not where it was today, so it didn't really make sense.
It felt a little out of place. We both agree, it felt more Star Wars, and Prithian feels a little bit more Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
it just felt a little bit weird.
It felt more sci-fi. This is more fantasy.
Yes, and I do understand that Crescent City is actually a little bit
sci-fi adjacent
fantasy blend. But again, that's not the world that we're in when this happens.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So it felt a little out of place, and you and I both kind of talked through maybe like what Sarah's reasons could have been for doing that, because I was saying it would have felt a little more correct for the world for Bryce to have fallen into a trance, kind of the way she and Hunt do when they go to visit Hell.
Yes, exactly. And it's like a vision or a memory that's presented to them.
Right, something that like she's seeing because the power was left there for her. But to your point that you made when we discussed it, Nesta and Asriel also needed to be able to see it. So a hologram was really kind of the only way for it to happen. And also, like, I almost wonder if it would have bothered me less if she just hadn't used the word hologram. Like, if she had just said...
A mirage
like,
or something.
All of the sudden, from the floor, like, burst, like, light, and all of the sudden Bryce could see a vision.
And it was, like, in, like, the stars or something.
And maybe she, like, would have, like, turned around to see if somebody else could see this, too, and it seemed like they could. I think it might even just be, like, the labeling of it as a hologram just
I actually really like that point,
felt a little out of place.
So that was tough.
So that's a very nitpicky Thorn.
But the fact that it went on for, several chapters.
Okay, so yeah, I was going to say. So that was your particular Thorn, I think, about it, and what I really kind of struggled with was that I was really expecting all of this information to take Bryce a significant amount of time to track down.
Right.
I thought she was going to have to go to at least 2 different places in Prithian to figure all of this out. I thought for sure a piece of it was going to be in the prison, but I also thought she was going to have to go to the library, and I guess that would have been duplicative because they go to the archives in Avalon, and maybe that would have felt a little bit too repetitive, so maybe that's why she decided not to do it that way. But I had also thought in my head, maybe they'll have to go to the day court, the seat of all knowledge.
Maybe she's, like, leaving something for the next ACOTAR book. There's a lot that Azrael has to discover, maybe.
Absolutely could be, but...
No, I get it.
In Silver Flames, setting it up with Clotho, researching all of the worlds, researching the history of all the different worlds, I think there was a part of me that wanted Bryce to have to work a little harder. I wanted her to work harder, not like she spent multiple days underground fighting deadly worms. I wanted her to work harder. Like, what more did you want, bitch?
Yeah. No, but I hear your point.
But I think to your point about this started to feel a little information dumpy.
Yeah.
And I think it would have felt less so if she had been able to glean a piece of the history from the murals, from writing left there, from a vision, and then that would have led them to a path where they would get the next piece of it and the next piece of it.
No, I guess, like, my one, like, the one big piece that she didn't get from that information download, which was the one that she really wanted, was how do you actually kill an Asteri?
That's true. And she did have to go back to Midgard for that answer, which brought her back into the main...
But I hear you on the rest of it. I really do.
But I'm also, as I'm talking it through now, I'm realizing that it doesn't bother me as much, because I do see that leaving Bryce in Prithia, and it might be, I mean, I said on this podcast several times, I was bracing myself for Bryce to be in Prithian for the majority of this book. So it could just be that that's really what I was priming myself for, and then when that's not what happened, we all know that I'm not great I'm not great when things don't go according to the way that I am.
I have one little tiny other thorn I'd like to insert into the Bryce, Nesta, and Azrael.
A third thorn, okay.
Yeah. The bean. The language
And that's not
bean.
Necessarily Bryce, Nesta, and Azrael. That's just sort of Bryce and Prithian.
It's just in Prithian, and like...
Because I actually really loved those first couple of sequences between Amren, Rhys, Azrael, and Bryce. And I loved when Azrael was like, she's lying.
Oh, yeah.
That was so hot.
Also, and Azrael's very,
and Bryce is like, okay, built-in lie detector.
Great.
Guess they have those here.
Another very hot Azrael moment when he lures Nesta out of the mask.
When he talks her down out of the mask.
When she's like all up in her death
energy. A man who is calm in crisis and takes charge. Are we kidding?
Listen, you know me, and that out of the 3 Bat Boys, Azrael, as much as I adore him, it's, Cassian, Rhys, Azrael for me. I am...
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Rhys is above Azrael for you?
Always has been, yeah. I know that you're in a struggling Rhys phase right now, and I understand that.
I just thought we were aligned on the fact that Rhys... Even after Silver Flames, Rhys is above Azrael for you?
Well, this leads me to my next point. Azrael now, in the events of the last 2 books, like, historically, it's always been Cassie. Like, that I've never been attracted to, like, the first main character. Like,
I put Cassian as my 3rd favorite out of respect for you always. He's just, like, off the table for me.
And I knew that he was your number 1.
I'm not even allowed to consider being attracted to Cassian because I would never do that.
But after this, and after... We didn't get a lot of Azrael and Silver Flames, but I'm like, damn... I'm so excited for his book.
I can't wait. I'm ready. My body is ready. Okay, so that was our first. All right, can I say that? Can I say the next?
Yeah, you
rose?
can start the next one.
Okay. So I'm just gonna do a blanket statement to let everyone know that pretty much every single rose that I'm gonna give to HOFAS today,
With the exception of one.
with the exception of
Well, it really actually does involve Lydia, so never mind. I rescind my statement.
of none, have to do with Lydia and or Rune.
Rune Janan, Crown Prince
of the Valbar and Fae. Former Crown Prince of the Valbar and Fae, since someone abolished the monarchy. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. So, my first...
Unwell already. Okay, continue.
So, my first rose was the escape from the Asteri dungeon.
No notes! Not at all.
I was so scared. That's actually what I was reading on my phone at work. And I don't...
You read that at the office around people? Excuse me. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that.
Do you not remember? Like, you were being so expressive. You were like healthily expressing everything you were feeling to like everyone around you.
Do you mean like books. Crying in the middle of the office?
Do you not remember? That happened before.
No, because the day before was a Monday. Day 2, everyone was
right.
in that.
You're right. It was Tuesday. Anyways, I don't know if you noticed at the time, but there was a point in the day where I became basically mute. And I didn't really say anything unless, like, I did not speak unless I was spoken to. And that is because I was reading on my phone the entire sequence of the escape from the Asteri dungeons.
I have never experienced, like, I actually don't know that I have ever experienced those kind of emotional peaks and valleys while reading a book. Maybe since I discovered that Severus Snape was not in fact evil during the Deathly Hallows. Like, I haven't ever had a book that I was waiting for like that.
Or that Harry was the final Horcrux.
Yeah, like...
Also, spoilers for Harry Potter.
No. It's been over a decade. It's fine. There's no excuse. But, like, it changed your body chemistry while reading it.
Yeah. I mean, my stomach was in knots.
I couldn't eat.
I felt very cold. I was feeling fear with them. I mean, that entire... And even before the actual escape starts...
You said it best yesterday, that moment where Pollux comes into the bathroom.
Because you're terrified for Lydia the entire time. Because you know immediately from starting to read this book, she's made her decision.
You know, I actually don't know if SJM has done that, but like made me feel this scared for a character before. Like, obviously, in the box, you were terrified for her whenever, you know, like...
But I knew she was going to make it out. I actually didn't know if Lydia was going to make it or not.
Yeah.
And from the beginning of HOFAS, you know that Lydia has made her decision. She is not letting Rune die in those dungeons. No. And if it takes her life to get him out, then that is what she's going to do.
And she planned on dying.
And she did not... There was no part of her plan that included her realistically getting to safety. So that whole sequence for me was so nerve-wracking and terrifying and exhilarating. I don't even really still know how to put it into words, how I felt.
I will never forget reading it for the first time ever.
I will never forget that. That was nuts. And the fact that she goes to the meat market and she's so smart and she's so calculated.
So smart.
And I love the way that SJM brought a character, totally new POV for us, by the way. Mm-hmm. We've never been in Lydia's head. We did not actually meet her on a page until book 2. And now all of a sudden here she is. And
she was the highlight.
For the first part, it was really Bryce and Lydia. We were getting Ethan and Therion and
moments of Hunt and Rune.
But the two characters that were really propelling the story forward were Bryce and Lydia. And for Lydia to have such an incredibly strong connection, at least, and maybe this is just me.
No.
you're in her head. You don't really know her yet, but you're in there
on her side
with her for every second and every calculation, every risk that she takes, every time she has to grit her teeth and swallow down.
It's a testament to SJM's
horror of what is happening
talent.
to her mate.
It is talent. The way that SJM
I'm covered in goosebumps
made us care that quickly. Like the hatred that she conveys from Lydia for the hysteria, and like I don't actually know if it would have been the same if it had been from a male POV. Just because like as a woman, the indignity of it all on any given day anyway, plus the just to the root evil that Lydia has to encounter every single day, and the way that she just
every night in her bed,
and the way that she just brushes it off, and she does the next thing, and she does what she has to do. I'm also now covered in goosebumps. Like I've never cared that much that quickly about a character before.
It was really incredible.
Yeah.
For me, Lydia was very much. I had a very similar experience with Lydia that I did with Manon when I was reading Throne of Glass. Perhaps even more so, because for every single scene where Lydia is trying to lay this plan in place, you know that one mistake and
it's all over.
And it's over. And even if she doesn't make a mistake,
it's a
matter of time.
Oh, for sure.
There was no scene that conveyed that more than when Pollux walks back into their room and says, "Did you hear the good news? They fixed the harpy."
You and I are aligned
in that moment, my stomach
God.
bottomed out. I thought it was already over.
I thought he already knew.
I thought I thought the harpy had already talked.
Yeah. It was so good.
And
God, she did that
I was
well.
so terrified for her. And then the actual escape, like them being in the elevator, and one of the guards and
Rune on her back and literally carrying him to that car. The resolve and the determination.
I'm not okay.
I know. And like Hunt's POV later when he's saying, she blew up on the ley lines. She blew up what was it? She didn't blow up the Eternal City, but some sort of stronghold.
It was
for
all
Ophion.
of their. I think it was all of their like transport.
Right,
lines.
she did that for the rebellion, but the escape, she did that for Rune, and you felt that every step of the way.
And I think the crown on the rose, because I'm deciding that's also something we're doing. For me, was the moment where she gets them to the edge, and also she brilliantly managed to have their wings grown back in time. Like she just did everything so perfectly.
Because it would have been better for Torture to cut them off again.
And she had to go to the meat market to get it from the Viper Queen, which is conveniently where she got to talk to Ethan and Declan and Flynn.
Good. So good.
And she's just brilliant. She is a mastermind.
Oh, yeah.
She's a mastermind. But the moment where she gets them to the edge and the depth charger is there and she's like, you gotta fly them down. The Dreadwolves are coming, and we see her shift into her deer form.
I love seeing her shift.
And she's this beautiful,
beautiful very pale doe,
very cream colored, and she just walks up to Rune and
nuzzles him.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna cry.
And I have messaged every single fan art creator that I follow on Instagram, and I'm like, please. Please.
For the love of God, please.
Please. I am begging you. Not unlike standing in Kramer's.
Can we hold the book?
Can I please hold the book? Can you please do the scene where Lydia nuzzles Rune in her deer form? And then she runs off to distract the Dreadwolves, giving them that final chance to get to safety. And Rune just loses it. It was...
So good. It was everything.
Perfect.
And I think what made it...
It was SJM doing what she does best. And
an
it
action
was
sequence.
So good.
It was one of her best. It really, really was.
So good.
I think also what made it so excellent was the tension, because we did not have one moment of ease leading up to that escape. The tension, going down into the 1,000 mystics under the Eternal City. Terrifying. Meeting Arethes, who we'll talk about a little bit later. Huge. Like every single step of the way, what Lydia was doing, and every single step of the way.
And the rest of the frat gang was stuck in the meat market the whole time, and that was a whole other pile of...
I can't even...
I'm just going to call it what it was.
A thorn.
From them, not necessarily from Sarah, but from them, like, idiocy.
like pure idiocy.
Just like idiot boys.
Leave it to the women to do the finagling and the masterminding.
And leave it to all of the boys to have wound up in a mess that they can't get themselves out of.
It's just too much. So indicative of real life.
And it's just so predictable.
Yeah, but I'm right there with you. It was in my top 3 SJM action sequences in the Massverse.
It was incredible.
Total.
For that particular
I'm right there with you.
sequence, I actually do not have a single thorn.
No. I have one directly after.
Except that Therion was there.
At the very end. Well, I appreciate him for saving Lydia.
Yes.
We have to give him that. He did stop her death. And it was close at that.
I will say that line that SJM wrote and Lydia laughed as she died. I was like,
resuscitate me later. It was so good.
It was so great.
So an immediate thorn-ish that I have following the high that was the entire escape. Mm-hmm. Like meeting the Ocean Queen on the depth charger. And let me just preface it with this. Like, and I think that SJM is slightly guilty of this in her books as a whole. Sometimes, and I've mentioned this, I know once or twice on this podcast, she overpowers her characters and then like you become disappointed by them at points. And
like the hype.
Yeah, and
hype
like
is too much.
And the ocean, we've always and like listen, the River Queen is supposed to be formidable, and then like she was apparently nothing on the Ocean Queen. And Jessica, you said it best yesterday. The Ocean Queen, she squelches.
I just really had a hard time. I really had a hard time because she was walking around and she was like, covered in like seaweed and coral. And I just imagined
and,
her
like,
being
crabs.
like always kind of wet. And so it was the weirdest, most unfortunate thing that like every time I imagined her entering a room, it just like sounded in my head a little bit like Squidward.
And like also it just smells a bit fishy all the time.
And she's just like.
And maybe I'm being unfair because I struggle with like aquatic life.
Oh my god! Do you know what it is? For me, it kind of was giving Davy Jones's Crew.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
That's not the correct interpretation. But because I was reading quickly and chaotically, I only got like half the description, which was like human, but also crabs, seaweed, sea snakes, shells. And so in my head, it was just this like always wet person that had like barnacles growing on them.
Oh my god.
And I'm like, I don't know. So it was very hard for me to like quiver in her presence because I was like.
And normally SJM, she does that. Like when she chooses to explore like a character and explore that world, maybe it's because we haven't gotten the House of Many Waters yet, which I know we don't know if it'll come in novella form or novel form. We assume it's down the line. Like maybe it's because we haven't got that yet where we get to fully explore the characters and fall in love with them. But at this point, we have had 2 books of Therion's point of view. Just a general thorn for me of the book was still like, I could not give less of a fuck. He annoyed me at pretty much at every single stage of this story. And I mean, he had moments, especially when, like you said earlier, when we were discussing this, with Sathia, and she kind of made him grow up a little bit maybe. And
her addition to his storyline made his storyline
less irritating,
more intriguing to me. Like I actually was like, oh, I'm kind of interested to see where this goes.
Yeah.
But Therion, as a whole, unfortunately for me, did not do himself many favors over the course of this story.
Yeah. And like just kind of there were moments on the depth charger that were really awesome. We loved, you and I both agree on this, like we loved the introduction of Lydia's kids into this. I think SJM did that beautifully.
That reveal was very cool. I think also, one more note about the Ocean Queen in particular, it was important that we learned from her that they did exist on Midgard before the Asteri got there.
That was huge. So it was not a purely human environment in Midgard. There was some Vanir.
Which is an important note.
And we know the Asteri, didn't fully have control over the Ocean Queen ever.
Because it means that even though it was basically, 80 or 90% inhabited by humans and animals, there were
there was magic there.
There was magic, and there, in particular, it seems in the water, which is interesting. And so, again, to your point of, I think there could be a House of Many Waters novella. Maybe there are some secrets within these aquatic.
Listen, I trust her. I'm ready to lean in. Should she release a book about the depths?
We're gonna read anything she writes,
for sure.
We're absolutely gonna be into it. But yeah, so you and I agree that the Ocean Queen,
bit of a letdown,
was a little bit of a
not unlike the River Queen, the River Queen's daughter,
bit of a squelch. The little like snake that she had hanging out,
that was cool.
You know what? I will say this: all it would take would be a really kick-ass costume designer, and the Ocean Queen could be actually very sick.
Yeah, and like as it pertains to her character, I get why she made the decisions that she made with Lydia. Like if she's going to accept an agent of the Asteri into and like accept her children, you're damn well going to be a spy for me. And I get it. I do. And, like, you have to be ruthless in this world because the characters are ruthless.
And she, in particular, has to be ruthless because she's one of the only beings that has survived the Asteri arriving in Midgard, all of the wars that have happened, and she has eluded their control.
Yeah, there's a lot of mystery surrounding her.
So I was okay with her being unlikable because I do, to your point, I think she does have to be ruthless. She does have to be cold. She simply cannot afford any kind of sentiment. She just can't.
Yeah.
And so I was okay with her being unlikable. I just really struggled with the squelching and the physical description and her like just being sort of this like wet person walking around everywhere.
So in the Ocean Charger, we briefly discussed this just now, but another rose for us was the reveal of Lydia's children and what that did to her relationship with Rune. And we love, even though it might have frustrated us briefly, that it caused a rift between her and Rune. We loved that. It felt organic. We loved that Lydia pushed back and was like, how dare you think of me differently?
No, it was great.
No, it was amazing.
I was totally caught off guard. That was nothing we could have ever predicted. I wasn't expecting Lydia to have children. At first, when she was running around looking for somebody, I thought maybe it was another sibling somehow, or I don't know. I just wasn't expecting. It finally dawned on me like right before the reveal happened. I was like, oh shit, Lydia has a kid. Kids. And so that initial reveal I did think was amazing. It was a really cool addition to her character. And this is the first main female character who is a mother that we've encountered in an SJM book. And I think that's
besides Farah and Silver Flames, we don't get her point of view in Silver Flames.
We don't.
Yeah.
And so I think this is really significant. And we know that Sarah is a mother. And so I'm very glad that she shared that perspective as an author with us. I thought it was really cool that we got. I thought it added to Lydia's character
so much
in a really beautiful way.
And I thought that it added to Rune's character in, okay, I'll take that on the chin. I was just told off. And
because at first he does do the thing where immediately he feels pity. And honestly, I think we all felt that for her a little bit.
Of course.
And it was really cool that through that scene, SJM kind of reminds us like, I don't need your pity.
Yeah.
This is not a sob story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change who I am or anything that I've done.
And I loved Rune coming back in the very matter-of-fact manner, just being like, I just found out you were the Hind. Give me a minute. And allow me to, like,
also him
process
kind of
that.
being like, am I not supposed to feel empathetic towards you because now I'm realizing you made a massive sacrifice for your children?
All of the emotions that those two went through, like, as a pair, it made sense to me. It felt right. That growth and that trajectory as a couple.
And they make each other better.
Yeah.
And it was really... It was really great. I loved.
It was a pleasure to read.
It was a pleasure to read because we start on the depth charger, right? And
oh my god, and him like watching her in bed next to her while he is also very unwell,
sitting vigil by her bed.
And shout out to Tristan Flynn.
Oh my god!
Shout out to Tristan Flynn with one of the best lines in the entire book.
We have a rose for him, right? Okay, just in case we don't, I'm gonna go ahead and give a rose to Tristan Flynn because he was such a delight. And he was kind of a nothing. Like, I shouted out Declan during our HOSAB and our House of Earth and Blood for all of his computer skills because he was super important. But, like, Tristan was always just kind of like the funny one. And but Tristan is funny.
He is, but he's a loyal friend.
You
and he
really
get
his
back.
You get his goodness and his core in this book.
Do you want to say it or do you want me to say it?
No, I want to say it.
Okay, you can say it.
He was like, get some sleep, Rune. I've got your girl.
Oh my god. Unwell. I am fully unwell. Because she is his girl.
She is his girl. She is his mate. We'll get to that later. But to go from that, and then she wakes up and she asks him if she's dead. She says, "Am I dead?" And Rune was like, And then she just immediately takes off, finds her sons, and so you go from this moment where you're like, oh my god, they're about to have this amazing tender reunion, reconciliation, whatever, and then it's like nope. But it was great, and it worked.
It was perfect, and I think that this leads us into
in contrast to,
and this leads us directly into our next point, which is one of our overall thorns for the book. And we take it with a grain of salt because obviously this is a high stress situation. This all happened in the course of a couple of months, so we give the characters grace. But that being said, Rune and Lydia's fights made sense to us.
It felt less like a fight and more like just a step they needed to
overcome and
take together
to get to the next level.
I never felt like Rune and Lydia were squabbling.
Yeah, and this leads us into Bryce and Hunt and their dynamics throughout the entire book. And while there were moments where it was like, obviously, this is my mate, I've got you, like through thick and thin, and that is what we love about those two characters. But there were moments of real irritation where you wanted to shake Bryce in particular, and there was a real lack of empathy. And I think that the main reason why that grated on us was because she has shown herself in the last two books to be one of the most empathetic characters, and in this entire Massverse,
and compassionate, and a champion of those who have endured the unthinkable atrocities that have been committed by the Asteri.
And while it's like really, it is commendable that she really felt and she embraced that and she felt that and she really tried to help every single human and, you know, creature that exists in this world that is thought of as less than. Mm-hmm. She did it at the expense of the feelings of her mate. And while I get that you have to make difficult decisions as a leader, there is, and this is one of your main points, an element of communication that has to occur in order for those decisions to be okay. And there was a lack of communication between those two, and there was a lack of empathy from Bryce for what Hunt had been through, which was, she just kind of discarded that at times in this book, which was so unlike her.
It is very unlike her, and
that's what frustrated us.
And I agree with everything that you just said, which makes sense because we've discussed it a lot. But yeah, I think the only thing I would add would be that I was really sad to be disappointed in her, if that makes sense. I felt like it was a part of her growth as a character in House of Sky and Breath to be grappling with that, to have to learn how to walk this new path where she has to put others before her own needs. And I felt like the end of Sky and Breath, where she realizes what this really cost, her need to know what Danica knew, I'm sorry, I'm going to call it like her selfish need to know what Danica was doing.
I don't think it's unfair to call Bryce a selfish character. And I think that that's what part of the thing that makes her lovable, because it makes her realistic.
Like,
we have elements of selfishness in all of us.
If I knew that my need to go do that ended up with my brother, my deceased best friend's mate, and my mate being tortured in the dungeons for God knows how long. Yeah. Regardless of what else you realized and came into focus, when you come back, and there is not 1 second of Bryce.
Like, I mean, she has it. We get her in tunnel modeling. She has moments of that, but like her overall trajectory as a character.
Like, there was this beautiful moment between Lydia and Rune, and maybe it's unfair for me to compare these two couples, but there was this beautiful moment between Lydia and Rune on Avalon where Lydia says to Rune, I couldn't bear it. And she starts shaking, and she can't even speak anymore.
Oh my God, I also reread that yesterday.
She can't even speak anymore.
Yeah.
Because she's so
overcome with the thought.
With even, like, and Lydia bore witness, which is different.
She had to do the torturing.
But and you know what? And I almost wish that maybe Lydia had, like, pulled Bryce aside and been like, you have no idea
what they went through down there,
what they endured.
And I think the moment for you and me, which really solidified this, like, Bryce, what the fuck moment, was when Hunt was like, I am here, I am trying, and I am with you, but, like, I was tortured.
And she says, that's not enough.
And I think what she says was, I also went through a hard time. She
says both things.
And to her credit, she was in a different world.
Scary,
I get it.
But horrifying. But not enduring physical, not the same. Not the same. You don't get to compare
She's like, I was worried about you.
Do you know how bad it was for me to be worried about what was happening to you? And if I were Hunt, I would have been like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was literally 1/1,000,000th of what was so horrible that was actually happening to me.
Hunt had to watch Baxian chew off Rune's hand.
Like, the amount of times that those scenes opened reminding us that the entire dungeon smelled of their waste.
And again, huge credit to SGM. I have never, ever been in a situation in a book where I have felt that amount of terror for characters before.
Oh, your stomach hurts. Your stomach hurts when you're reading these scenes.
Pure anxiety.
And that is, I think, one of the reasons why we are so frustrated with Bryce, because we as readers know what they endured and how horrible it was. And for Hunt to say, I'm here, aren't I? I'm here with you, even given everything that just happened to me, which, by the way, I've not been given 1 second
to talk about or process.
I'm here with you. And in the caves in Avalon, she turns around and says, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. No, it's
what?
You and I have the same note with that.
She's supposed to be his mate.
Yeah. And
and I never thought I would say this ever, but it kind of makes me understand what some of the people who were saying we don't really think that they're mates, this is not how mates really behave with each other.
And I think that later on in
mates. I do still believe they're mates, but
I think that she checks herself later on in the books to an extent. Not to the extent that we want her to.
Exactly.
But I think that...
And you and I both agreed that was, for us, too little too late.
And here's the thing. We get internal monologues in books, and they frustrate us. Characters have to think through things before they make the decisions that they make. And at the end of the day, Bryce, I think, does make the correct decisions, with the exception, which is a thorn for me later, of shoving her parents into Prothean without their permission.
Separating them from their adopted son.
Yeah. I was super not a fan of that. However, I think at the end of the day, Bryce does make the correct decisions. And at the end of the day, she is there for her mate. And push comes to shove, they are there for each other. There was just, it didn't, and I think this is what it comes down to for me. I thought that with the first 2 books in this series, we were kind of past that a little bit, and they had overcome these issues already. And so it didn't, to me, make total sense that they were encountering this. They were having
kind of the same fight that they were having in Sky and Breath.
Yeah.
They had already, done
this.
They had really already had that fight, and Hunt came around and was like, no, I'm with you. You're right. We have to do this. Even if it scares me, we have to do this. And
it felt redundant.
And you're absolutely right. They're still having the same fight.
Yeah.
And it feels petty.
Yeah.
And it feels...
And it was hard. And I get it. Like, I get it. Like, all of this, okay, so from, like, the moment at the beginning of Earth and Blood, and I made this point to you a couple of days ago, I think, to where we are now in the story, it's been not even a year. Bryce is, 25 years old, and she was a party girl before all of this happened. And she, this horrible, horrible traumatic thing happened to her, and she's kind of learning how to deal with being the leader of a movement. And, so I want to give the character grace because I love her, and who knows how anyone else would respond in a situation where you were thrust into being the leader of something and you have all this power, you don't know how to do it, you don't know how to wield it. But for their relationship itself,
as a couple,
which is, let's call a spade, a big part of the reason why we read these books.
Romantasy.
It is romantasy. It didn't hit and it didn't make sense at points in this book. There were points when it was beautiful and I loved it, and you were reminded that they are mates and they are there for each other, but there was just enough of the dissonance where I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So, Thorn for us that we agree on.
Yeah.
And I think is totally valid.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. And they are one of my favorite couples in the SJM verse.
Yeah.
So that was a bummer for me.
Yeah.
To be frustrated with them as a couple and to be left wanting for Bryce to be better.
So thank God for Rue and Lydia.
To her mate. I mean, oh my God.
So I think we should pivot into another thing that we loved on a much lighter note. Anything with the fire sprites.
Lighter and warmer. Just the flames. And we've said this from the beginning, ever since Lele.
Oh my God.
And my goodness, do these fire sprites do her proud.
And Arethes.
They are just incredible. I mean, they're so brave and so good and so positive.
I know.
And
it was so cool meeting the queen. Like, I did not expect that.
Also, I love, and we're going to get to this in a little bit, but I'm going to touch on it here, knowing what we know about Lydia's powers.
Yeah.
The fact that from the jump, she had a very deep respect for the fire sprites. Like, when she talks to them in the meat market, she is so deferential to them.
Almost.
And when she meets Arethes, and I just think it's so great. Like, of course, like, it makes so much sense.
She was giving us clues.
It makes so much sense, and there are other little tidbits that I've picked up, like rereading different sections. There are like tiny little throwaway lines about Lydia staring into a flame.
Right, like they spoke to her.
Or when the Autumn King shows up and he's got the flames around, and Lydia's like trying to control, as if she could make the flame go away.
I think it's so funny because like the fandom was so confused because, obviously when day and night are speaking to each other, mind to mind,
wreathed in
she
flame.
is wreathed in flame. Everyone was like, why? She is a stag shifter, no? Or a deer shifter. Why is she presenting herself this way?
She could have appeared as a deer.
And I loved that. I loved it. Sarah gave us all the clues that we needed.
And they were so subtle that we didn't even notice until a reread, which is the best.
And it just was what it reinforces why you love reading these books. Like, to me, honestly, like in other SJM novels, I have been most excited for the romantic pairings and figuring out like what's going to happen there. This was the first time that we have been live for a release with SJM. We caught up. Like, she started writing these and releasing these books a lot longer before we entered the fandom. It was so fun to experience that in real time. And absolutely. I was more excited about the plot of certain elements of what might happen in Flame of Shadow and like what the characters might reveal and what they mean for the larger mass of us as a whole than, oh my God, what's going to happen with Vern and Lydia? Although, again, like number one.
I mean, that was me the entire book. There were all these other very exciting things going on, but for me, the through thread was
Rue and Lydia
Rue
story.
Lydia for sure.
Unreal.
And yeah, I think going back to our original Rose that we were talking about being the fire sprites, I loved that they got to come back and save the day in so many ways that really mattered.
It was a parallel to what happened in Nothing Blood.
It was a full circle moment.
It really was.
And this series really is just as much about
the little guy,
the plot and the supporting characters as it is about the romantic pairings, which is what makes it so special and what makes Sarah's series so special.
I would say this book we got the least of we got a lot of the tension that we love between characters, but like the actual like moments between the romantic pairings and that part of the plot, it was a lot less than it has been in other books.
Yeah, because the focus, like I said, the focus is really on the story and the world, and the entire cast of characters, and it was beautiful. In particular, the fire sprites. So they were our Rose, and a supporting character that's getting a thorn is Ariadne, which is feels so wrong.
It feels wrong, but you know what?
You said it best.
You said it best yesterday. There is no way that Sarah J. Maas, creator of Abraxos, introduces a dragon-like character that does not get a stay in the sun.
A dragon shifter.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they call her a dragon.
Interesting,
which is interesting.
Because we get the word shifter after all of the other...
Wolf shifter, lion shifter, whatever shifter.
We do not get
just
a dragon.
A dragon. So, apparently, that means that all dragons have a humanoid form. And they're not a shifter. Like, they are... Like, it's almost like their true essence is the dragon. It's not like...
Yeah, and I was disappointed by her. We agree. It was just kind of meh. She just kind of succumbed to whatever.
Well, she once again didn't do anything.
But I just refuse to believe that SJM introduces a dragon and doesn't have something planned for her down the line.
I agree. I'm agreeing because I hope that that's true.
Yeah, I mean, me too. And it'll be a big thorn for me if it's not true.
Because I was hoping for a little bit more from her, and I guess the astronomer up until a certain point, is the astronomer dead?
Ethan kills him in this book.
He does.
Yeah.
So for the majority of the time of this series, she is a fugitive slave.
Yeah.
So I will throw her that bone.
Well, yeah, no, we give her grace.
We're being very generous.
I would like to make a prediction in general for the rest of the series in the Crescent City world.
Okay.
I believe that she and Tristan will get together at some point.
I love that prediction.
I hope it's true.
I'm here for it. I have a crush on Tristan. I think he might have replaced Ethan in my crush hierarchy.
I think Ethan edged out Tristan for me still in this book. Okay. But he had his moments of...
Tristan was just so
funny,
great, and funny.
And he's such a good friend.
And I actually think he would be a great boyfriend.
I agree.
And I think he could use somebody with a little bit of fire because he also has an attitude problem.
Oh, for sure.
But I really loved, like even early on, like in the meat market, of all of them, Tristan was really emotionally undone by the situation they were all in.
And he was mad at Ariadne too.
He was angry. He was really angry, and he didn't want to give the Hind a second of consideration. He would have. I think he would have stormed into the Asteri's dungeon himself to get Rune back, and that's just
too. He was a Rose. He really was.
He really was.
So if we're going linearly, immediately after this situation on the depth charger, and
is that where we
parallel and parallel? It's happening in
wait. Then I want to throw in one impulsive spur of the moment Rose.
Do it. I'm ready.
I actually loved that Ethan had to become Josiba's assistant.
Oh my god. It was the levity. And you know what?
So funny.
Jessica, those first 300 pages, that first third of the book was so fucking stressful that we needed the Ethan moments.
I needed Ethan having to unpack Josiba's shit.
And sort through files.
It was so funny.
And also just shout out for Josiba, being the head of the House of Flame and Shadow.
She's so cool.
I guess only second to the Under King.
She was second in the House of Flame
and Shadow. But we also got to see, yes or no, the House of Flame and Shadow headquarters was giving the Slytherin common room.
Yes. Underground.
And we already discussed in our Welcome to Midgard episode that the House of Flame and Shadow is Slytherin.
Slytherin.
Okay, glad we're in agreement. Mm-hmm. So if we're going lineally,
yeah,
after the depth charger / the events that happen in the meat market, we make it to Avalon. And in Avalon, I think perhaps our biggest rose, and yours in particular, I know, mine too, is Rune and Lydia having the biggest crush on each other. And
oh my god, I can't believe that I wasn't focused. I was adding something to our notes.
And just and it was, you know what it was, Jessica? It was giving the tension between Bryce and Hunt in Earth and Blood. I think that I've been craving that since that book because
of course, because the initial fall is so special.
Yeah.
And even in real relationships, right? Like every couple experiences that.
Oh my God.
Like,
when you have the crush.
It is a beautiful thing to be married for 50 years and to have a whole life together and look back on that. And I'm sure that moment is, I mean, we all hope we get to experience that moment. But the initial crush and the initial fall and that
the butterflies, in your tummy.
It's such a fleeting thing, and it was so
special.
For me, it was my favorite part of the whole book because I am a sucker for the initial fall.
Wait, can I say my favorite part out of all of it? Like the favorite scene was when Rune is explaining something. I forget what it is to Lydia. I was reading it out loud in your apartment a couple nights ago, and she is distracted, understandably, might I add, by the muscles in his forearms.
They both became so relatable.
And she's like, "What?
What?" Yeah,
and he knows that she was looking at her.
And then immediately you get his POV right after, because I'm not even sure we got it in that quick of cadence with Bryce and Hunt, you know? But the fact that we were in both of their heads while that whole...
It was so good.
The whole sequence on Avalon where they are in the archives and they've gotten over their initial kind of like tension.
Yeah.
And now the underlying tension, which is like very hilariously prodded by Flynn and Declan.
Oh my God. Shout out to Declan
in Flynn. In just the best way. Flynn being like,
maybe you should talk to her.
You could talk to her. And Rune is like, shut up.
And it's so much better because we know Rune, as you mentioned the other night, to be like this fucking stud in the Fae world.
Oh, he is the romancer of females. He knows what to do.
He knows 3 things.
He knows
Women is
all
sitting on
3
his
things.
face. Like,
Rune doesn't... Females don't make Rune nervous.
No.
He is so
He's unwell
around Lydia, and he is so awkward.
Well, he's met his match and his mate.
And it was just so... It was so much
fun.
Better
it was so fun.
Anything I could have imagined. that alone makes this book utter joy for me.
And you know what? It was that combined with the moments of real emotion between them.
Tenderness.
Yeah.
Tenderness and intimacy and vulnerability.
Oh
the
my
two
gosh.
of them really...
Jessica, it was perfect.
It was perfect. We have no notes.
No notes.
I warned you guys. Like, all I really want to talk about is Rune and Lydia because this was my favorite part of the entire book. And I know that that's lame because there were so many, like, sick, epic things that happened in this book.
I agree.
But let's be honest. We love this genre because we love love.
Yeah.
And we love love in the fantasy world. And for me, this couple and their journey of falling in love over the course of the events that happen in this book were absolutely my favorite part.
So I have a question for you.
Story.
So you know how my top 3 have always have always been Cassie and Rune and Aedion.
You're gonna make me do this right now.
Say,
Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous.
Did Rune make it into your top 3 often? I know. So Jessica's top 5 women, by the way, are, as shout out to Emily Galt, Aelin, maybe Lydia, Aelin. Did Rune make it into?
It's a pyramid.
Did Rune make it into?
Aelin, Manon, Lydia.
I'm not talking about the women. The females, sorry.
But
I'm talking about the males.
It's easier for me to do the women. What does that say?
I don't know. But I know that Lydia made it up there for you. Did Rune have the same effect on you?
I don't want to say because Rune is also yours.
No, and it's okay. Listen, I have Cassian. And I will always have him, so it's okay for you to...
I think the truthful answer is yes, but I haven't really reassessed my order yet, and I'm not prepared to do so at this time.
That's a fair answer.
Because I have to also say...
Did Hunt make it out of your top 3? Or is he still in there, but he's not number 1 anymore?
I don't know.
I wanted him to hit back a little more in this book. Not in an aggressive way, but I wanted him to hold his own.
I'm just disappointed with them as a couple right now after reading this book. And I think that is affecting my...
Do you think, a little bit in the feeling stage?
Yeah, I do.
No, but I think your feelings about it.
But I also just knew, we knew going into this that this was the third of the Bryson Hunt trilogy. And as much as Rune and Lydia were my favorite part of this book, that is actually kind of
indicative.
If this was the third of the Bryce and Hunt trilogy, and in the final book of the trilogy, a different couple was far and away my favorite.
Yeah, I hear you. I will say though that in the Crescent City books in general, we've always had more POVs than have been in the ACOTAR world. In Tog, we had more. But there wasn't a
Tog
main...
was different, though, because Tog was a 7-book series.
Where we kind of had all the same POVs.
And it's more of a traditional book series.
Yeah.
I actually don't know for sure if she had, fully decided about
it's why
how
I take some of the stuff in the early
work.
books of Tog with a grain of salt, because I don't know if she had fully planned those crossovers yet. Or
I don't know if she had either. Yeah. And whether or not she would even have the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
To write
totally
that many books. Because Bryce and Hunt as a couple fell a little flat for me in this book, I think it has dimmed his allure.
Fair enough.
Which I'm absolutely devastated by to admit.
Okay, so moving on from the big good, which was Rune and Lydia.
Everything having to do with Rune and Lydia.
So a lot of those moments that we loved happened in Avalon, and one of our raisins in Avalon.
Thorns.
Sorry,
We're
Thorns.
doing
We're doing
Rose
and Thorns for the branding. And it's not huge for me because they are secondary characters and not main characters, but I was just disappointed by Morven and the Autumn King. He really disappointed me. King. I don't know what maybe I had read one too many Reddit theories, but I really had it in my head that he and Ember were mates, and deep down he was looking for a way back to Prithian, and I thought that he had access to Prithian. Another thing I was wrong about, by the way, I was wrong that Jessica could jump around. She is not a world walker. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being wrong about that. I was right about the 400 years thing. That was wrong. But I just really wanted there to be more from the Autumn King. And I feel slightly gaslit by Sarah J. Maas, because in that interview, she said that the Autumn King was one of her favorite characters. And so I really thought that there was going to be a little bit more from him. He ended up just being the prick that Bryce always thought he was.
She did also say every time there's an opportunity for him to do the right thing,
he doesn't do it. So I guess that maybe she told it was right in front of my face the entire time. We chose to ignore it
to something else, because I was with you. I was also really holding out hope that at least one of these two characters would turn out to be someone to root for.
Maybe our fascination with the Autumn Court in Prithian was wrongly transcended into our fascination
let us just say, I hope that Eris's character arc takes a different
If we are wrong about that, it has to. There is no way.
If Eris doesn't get a redemption arc, then I will riot.
I had really been clinging on to hope that there was something else there.
I did think it was significant and very interesting. I don't know why I wasn't expecting it. I was not expecting Rune to kill his sire.
And I loved it.
I did.
I loved every moment of that.
I loved it. I also loved later on when Lydia's like, so how are you doing with the patricide? Feeling okay? She's
Amazing.
like, don't worry about it. You'll be just fine.
Done it too, to an extent.
She's
not in
like,
the same way, but I've also been there.
She's literally like, it's chill. Sometimes our dads are shitty. And when that happens, you can kill them and it's okay.
Amazing stuff.
And I was like, wow.
God, she's so cool.
You are very scary.
She's terrifying.
You are very scary.
She's up there with Nesta for me.
And Manon.
Oh, yeah. Manon's like the OG terrifying.
I have a note.
Okay.
In the next section.
Okay. Okay, so general reasons for us, Morven and the Autumn King didn't end up being...
a little bit of a thorn.
A little bit of a thorn.
It's tough for us, you guys, because we have raisin. We were going with grapes and raisins when we were writing our notes. And so all
we recently switched to roses and
still
thorns.
labeled grape or raisin.
It happened in real time during the episode.
I looked at you last night and I was like, I feel like there's another
thing that we could
version
be
of this that we could be using and I can't think of it.
I'm so glad that it happened in the first 5 minutes of the episode and not in
the last.
Yeah, exactly.
I am too.
Great. Okay, so are we going into our next big thing?
Which is
hell.
Yeah.
So you and I have slightly different opinions on this. I'm also upset about his dad not being the...
Yeah, let's just go ahead and get the thorn out of the way. I think
Hunt's paternity in general.
I think it'll be most efficient this way.
She hyped it up too much.
That
and then
was
let us
a
down.
huge bummer for me. The way that Rune and Lydia are like my biggest rose of the whole story. I truly think my biggest thorn is Hunt's paternity storyline.
Yeah,
I felt like there was a lot of buildup. She really made us feel like Hunt had this huge journey of self-discovery to go on, and a big part of that was going to be about who his father was, and instead it was like
the interview gaslit us a little bit.
We made it almost, like we made it through 2/3 of the book. At the very end of the second third,
yeah,
we just get this kind of anticlimactic, you were a test tube baby reveal. And at one point, Isabel actually was like...
I actually thought that it was like the essence of three of Apollyon, Adis, and Thanatos. I literally... I'm just going to say this, and this is so gross, and I'm so sorry, but I'm just going to say it out loud. I literally thought they all combined their semen, and like someone was Hunt's dad.
I can't believe you just said the word semen on this podcast.
So sorry.
Disgusting. What I thought you were going to say was you literally looked at me and you were like, is this a Mamma Mia situation?
Well, I was getting that. I thought that it was a Mamma Mia situation, and
it still kind of feels like a Mamma Mia situation because they're all sitting around the table, and Apollyon's like, hello, son, and Thanatos is like, he's more a son of mine than a son of yours.
Is like, and it's really mine too. And
actually, it's this angel who was in Midgard. And everyone's sitting around there. It's also kind of like the Spider-Man meme.
Oh my god!
It was just kind of like, what is happening?
I really thought that I had written down the name of Hunt's father is actually Hyraeus. It's Hyraeus. And I guess, like, Apollyon, in the same way that Apollyon had contributed his, I hate saying the word essence, but his essence to, like, the Crystallos demon and to the Thunderbirds, who were, like, the first prototype of whatever Hunt was. And I actually, I had to go back and read this because I was so confused by the whole hell sequence. And I think that's actually my main note about it, is that I just didn't get it. And I had to go and reread it before I even understood it. And I don't know if I fully still do. Because there was no guarantee that Bryce was going to be, or whoever inherited the Starlight from Taya / Helena / Selene, there was no guarantee that if at that point they had not combined all 3 sections of the Starlight and they weren't able to get to Avalyn, then they would need a power-up. So that is the reason for the existence of the Thunderbirds, which I actually thought was kind of cool, knowing, like, why they were there.
Yep.
to your point, which you said something funny earlier today or was yesterday, where you were like, they couldn't have just stopped with like the hellfire.
Well, yeah, that's really my nitpicky like thorn. I'm like, Sarah created this incredible moment where they arrive in hell, right? Adis greets them. He puts them in the boat. It's very Hades.
Oh yeah,
it's very Harry and Dumbledore going to find the locket Horcrux.
Yeah.
It's very spooky. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And then they get to the shore, and Apollyon appears, and Hunt does a little surge of lightning, and Apollyon raises his hand, and for the first time we see that he has this same power as Hunt, and it
Hunt's
connects.
lightning is diluted hellfire.
And it connects,
isn't that crazy?
And it connects with Apollyon's power, and he says, "Hello, son." What a sick moment!
Where she left it at
I really actually don't understand
why it was the test
why
tube thing.
she decided to take that incredible goosebump dramatic moment and water it down to like an awkward test tube situation.
I'm just like throwing it out. Like maybe all three of our main male characters to this point, Rhys, Rowan, and Hunt. Rhys and Rowan have both had incredible power of their own. Rowan is Aelin's Caranum, and Rhys is the most powerful High Lord that's ever been. In fact, Bryce says when she goes back, we have powerful Fae here. We don't have Fae like that.
And now knowing that he's descended from Taya makes
but like
sense.
Maybe I actually kind of like that one of her main male characters like wasn't overpowered and he was just a good person and he was Bryce's mate and he still had incredible power of his own, but it isn't like what made him him. What made him him was his character. I liked that. At the same time, she fell into that trap that I have noticed in subtle moments throughout SJM's series where she overpowers people and then kind of lets them... It's like, okay, if Rhys is the most powerful High Lord in the entirety of Prythian's history, whatever, like how did this Highburn situation even happen? The whole war. He's struggling on the battlefield like the rest of them.
Right.
But he's the most powerful High Lord in history and has powers unlike anything anyone's ever seen.
Also has to deal with like defiant peons in his
it's like
court.
I don't know if it's the character's fault or if it's something that SJM didn't fully explore in her
it's
writing.
It's an inconsistency.
Yeah. And so it didn't bother me to the same extent that it bothered you, but because I kind of liked that he's just Hunt, but I just didn't think it made sense with the way that, for example, Jessica had kind of, we kind of had clues that he was a very powerful being, and that didn't really come to fruition. He was a lab tech.
No, I am going to die on this hill. The sentence in the epilogue between Jessica and Adis, Adis says to Jessica, "I think Athalar's father." Singular.
Which is Hyreus, allegedly.
Which they like say, like Adis says, like, no, your father was an angel and Apollyon and Thanatos. However it is that they all three engineered Hunt's conception.
Mm-hmm. The bonus chapter, which is normally so intentional from SJM's point of view, it didn't really make sense.
I think it was a miss.
That's fair.
I think it was a little bit of a fumble.
No.
And I have never, ever, ever felt that way about any of her writing, ever. But for Adis to say to Jessica...
You know the male better than I did.
I think Athalar's father, singular, would have been proud, period. But feel free to disagree. You knew the male better than I did. That sentence does not align with what was revealed about Hunt's dad in hell.
And it implies that he's talking about Apollyon rather than Hyreus.
Looking backwards, the only person it could be implicating is Apollyon because there's no contextual evidence whatsoever that Jessica ever interacted with the angel who worked in the
it's kind of like Jessica, like the idea was Adis's. Thanatos was the mastermind behind it all.
Maybe Thanatos is a geneticist.
And then Apollyon is the one who actually contributed his power.
It seems like Apollyon somehow found a way to imbue the embryo with hellfire with the ability to wield, to produce and wield hellfire, right? So if that is the case, then no, that sentence between Adis and Jessica doesn't make sense.
No, and I hear you, and I think that is a valid point. Especially caring as much about, like, he's one of our main characters.
I've never, ever even dreamed of giving SJM a demerit.
It's happening.
This is a demerit for me. You cannot have that kind of an inconsistency.
Because normally the mystery in the bonus chapter makes sense once you've read the story.
It wasn't even a bonus chapter.
And I still
it wasn't even a bonus chapter.
Whatever it was,
it was an epilogue.
But I now like still have further questions, like which father were you referring to? So it's confusing, and we're gonna call it a thorn.
The thorn.
For Jessica, it was the thorn.
But it's not even attached to a rose. It's just a big thorny stem.
Okay, but like small grape was that Apollyon is still incredibly hot and wields hellfire.
We are big Apollyon girlies, and I just want to say that we are so justified. After reading this book, we were a little nervous about saying we were Apollyon girlies. That was risky.
It was risky.
Wow, did it pay off?
It really did.
I feel validated.
I agree.
He's very hot. Who would you cast as Apollyon? Rapid fire.
That's so unfair.
Chris Hemsworth.
Because of the leathery wings, I am visualizing him as Illyrian.
No, they are 3 blonde brothers. And I'm sorry, but what does that make you think of?
The Valg?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Erewhon, Orcus, and whatever the third name was. It sucks to be him.
Well, we don't even have time this episode to get into the parallels between the Princes of Hell and the Valg. But I just want to say that another small grape. First of all, Apollyon still hot, wields hellfire, hot.
I love that what they were calling lightning was actually hellfire.
So
that was
cool.
so sick.
So sick.
And another reason why it was such a thorn that she couldn't have just left it there.
Also, the fact that until the very end, we were still unclear on the actual allegiances of hell.
Very cool.
And then,
I still don't really know.
When they all
we know they hate the Asteri, but like why?
When all 24 miles of the Northern Rift were covered by soldiers from hell.
It was like the Uruk-hai army, but if they were good.
Oh, and it was also like in the Battle of Minas Tirith at the very end.
Oh, and the Green Army comes?
Yes. That...
Wow, we've descended, for those of you who are just listening, we've descended into the very flips. Alexis Rose-esque hand gestures.
So that was all cool. So there were moments of real, like, wow, I am so happy that parts of this storyline that she introduced in Sky and Breath, like, paid off. In Flame and Shadow. Okay, so after Hell... Bryce coming into her power in Avalon, that was pretty cool.
That was actually very cool.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the island becoming very tropical. That was really fun. And the Syrinx reunion, gets a tiny rose.
Tiny rose.
That gets a tiny rose.
Because we were worried. We didn't know what was happening with
I asked you at one point. At one point, I was like, who is feeding Syrinx?
Not to worry. He was with Ember and Randall. He was well taken care of.
He was okay. It was also just so joyful getting to have those reunions really quickly. Like, SJM really threw us a bone with that helicopter arrival. Fury, Juniper, Syrinx, Ember, Randall, Cooper. Still weird.
I'm glad we got
still weird
something
to include him in that mix
from Fury because I thought we were going to get a lot more from her this book. So.
That's a tiny thorn for me.
Me too. We thought that was one of our full episodes was about Fury. In season 2.
It's another moment where I feel like we were a little bit gaslit.
Yeah. I'm actually still holding out hope since we know that this series is not yet done, that we'll find out more about her. But yes, absolutely. I would say the same thing. A little bit of a thorn for me.
Yep.
But so immediately after the reunion in Avalon, and we get, a small sequence with Bryce playing around with her new powers. They go to the Northern Rift.
Yes.
To greet the armies of hell.
Well, yeah, they're going to open the portal to hell.
Now, this was fucking cool. We haven't really had an Antarctica-esque moment in the Massverse so far.
It's been a while since we've been really cold since ACOTAR, actually.
Yeah, I mean, and this was like freezing. You know what it was? It was giving the Winter Soldier in Civil War and the Avengers when they're in like the the command center. horrifyingly scary seeing what the Asteri did to the Harpy. I mean, as horrible as it was a rose to me. It made me understand what they were doing with Hunt's lightning.
I'm going to throw a tiny bit of a thorn in there to say that I felt like it was a little bit of a stretched at, like, to hear that the Asteri all along have also had some kind of other secret agenda to learn how to reanimate the dead.
Well, explains why the Tay wanted to keep the trove away from them.
It just seemed to me, I was like, but they already have a motive. We already understand why they're evil. I don't need there to be more piled up. Like, they're evil enough for me to be scared of them and for them to be effective villains. I'm also not a person who actually really loves for her heroes to be that challenged. So that's probably just a very
more of a you thing, more of like a note,
more of a me thing, because they did create the trove and they created the mask, which
so they could command the dead.
So I guess actually, as I'm sitting here and talking this through, it actually does make sense that they would have been trying to achieve the same end in Midgard without the weapon that was originally created to accomplish that.
Yeah. No, I just really liked the scenery of it all, the descriptions.
It was
like, it was just really cool.
You could totally see it playing out in front of you, and it did feel very cinematic.
Yeah. No, it was cute and bright, and like Hunt making sure that Bryce's, earmuffs or whatever were on properly. It was like little moments
I missed that.
It was just like little moments of tenderness between the two of them, which I liked.
Do you think they have different shaped earmuffs for Faye?
Huge thorn for me, and probably my biggest note for Bryce in the book. I know that the relationship, like her interactions with Hunt, were for you. Your biggest thorn for me, it was putting her parents in a different world when she hadn't teed it up for them, hadn't warned them, and gave them no choice in the matter. And I understand the means, like, and at least, you know what? At least she and Hunt communicated about that. I'll give it to them. I understand why it had to happen in the grand scheme of things, but at the end of the day, you do not shove without knowing what the end result is going to be. Your parents, who, by the way, are the sole guardians of Cooper.
Yeah, I think separating, after doing what she did, going to the lengths that she went to get Cooper to her parents in Hosab, it's not consistent with her character to then separate them, just sort of leave Cooper with Fury and Juniper and dump her parents into an entire different universe. Now, I will
say, as I'm saying it out loud, that, you know how we said earlier on in the podcast that she doesn't fully trust Nesta yet, but there is that underlying understanding that they have that these two would be allies at the end of all things. Like, they have that same, like, I feel like she wouldn't have left them there if she hadn't met Nesta. I think if it had just been Azriel or Faye or Reese, I don't think that she would have put them there.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
At the same time, it's not really a good enough reason for me.
You know what? I think I would have done it. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about it.
That is a pivot.
And I think I would have done it.
I don't know, man. For me, that is kind of up there. Where I won't even get into Reese's actions in Silver Flames, but it is just not what you do to those that you love most.
Here's what my big note about it is, it was not in keeping with her character to go to the lengths that she went to get Cooper to her parents so that they could be a family, right? Like, Bryce is big about, he's a kid. He just needs to be somewhere safe. He deserves to have parents. He deserves to be loved. That was her whole thing. She lied.
It was the lack of communication. I think they would have done it if she had told him about it.
To Hunt. Big time about that whole plan.
I have notes about that too.
Of course we do. Yeah. And for her to then turn around in the next book and be like, oh yeah, that thing that I did where I didn't trust anybody and I took advantage of other people and I manipulated and withheld truth, all because I had this one noble cause of getting this kid to two people who are going to keep him safe. Actually, one book later, I'm going to turn around and lie and manipulate to separate them, and then chuck his new parents, the only stable family he's ever had, into a different universe without telling anybody about it.
And the sucky part is that I believe that Ember and Randall would have done that. Like, because that is
gone.
And that
if
is
Bryce
what
had said, listen,
this is what I think needs to happen for the greater cause. They
for
would have
your
listened
whole
to her.
family, for you and Randall and Cooper.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Please trust me on this.
Yeah.
I think they would have. And it's just not.
And that being said, I loved the Ember
that moment where the rift opened and you're like, you think she's
goes,
opening the portal to hell,
Nesta.
and she goes, hello, Nesta. We were all like,
Okay, so
that was a great moment for me personally, because I was left feeling like I didn't quite get as much of Prithian as I was hoping for. Mm-hmm. So to have that reintroduction, to have that come back full circle, I was actually quite relieved. Do I think it was a shitty thing Bryce did, like lying to her parents and luring them to the Northern Rift and shoving? By the way, she sent them to a land where she is like public enemy number 1.
Yeah, and by the way, valid for those in Prithian who...
Especially from what we know about Rhys. Huge gamble on her part. Was it
one that paid off? And I love it that it was Nesta, because we know that Nesta and Rhys butt heads. And Nesta doesn't back down when she disagrees with Rhys. And I loved
the snippets we get from that in the bonus chapter where he's like, you had no right. And Nesta's like, I had every right. Mine.
Which, by the way, I, in recent books, have not been agreeing with Rhys as much, but I do kind of agree with him here. Like, that was a big fucking risk to, with someone that you do not know, to trust them with this. Don't get me wrong.
Your point,
I love
Bryce
Nesta.
and Nesta have a very unique connection. They are both made in a way. And I think there is a certain level of understanding between people who really do understand the gravity of the power they wield.
For sure.
And I think Nesta, who has been around a lot of power-hungry, selfish, evil people. Nesta has a good barometer for knowing whether or not this is somebody
she can do it. No wrong.
And the Trove the Trove does not belong to the Night Court.
The Trove doesn't really belong to anyone.
The Trove doesn't belong to anybody. But
those who can wield it.
If it was going to belong to anybody in Prithian, it belongs to Nesta. It's not Rhys's to decide who gets to touch it and who doesn't.
That is what brings me to my favorite take ever that Emily Gold has literally ever texted to us, which is, I believe that SJM, and I agree with her, is teeing Nesta up to be High Lady of the Dusk Court. It's all there. She does not fully feel at home in the Night Court. She has her own power.
Do you think Cassian would leave Rhys?
I don't know, and I'm really nervous. I think that he would leave with Nesta, but I think it would wreck him. I think that's a whole other...
She's the only reason he would leave, but he could not remain Rhys's general and a member of Rhys's inner circle if he served a different court.
Yeah, and that's purely conjecture. There's no way to know this. It's just a theory, but Emily texted that to me, and I was just fully unwell afterwards. And it was
what if Nesta became queen?
Oh my God, I'm unwell. We have to move on.
Everybody's saying Lucien could be High King, so I'm just throwing out.
If Nesta can't be High Queen, I hope that Lucien can be High King.
Or
at least a very senior advisor to Rhys to keep him in check.
I see it more from Nesta, and I guess we can touch on this in a very. I promise we're almost to the end in our section where we're talking about what comes next and the 8-pointed star connection between Bryce and Nesta.
I loved that.
I do.
And we did touch on that in our previous episodes.
I do believe we're going to find out that the Archeron sisters are also descended somehow, some way from the Starborn line of Fae.
I would love that. And I hope it's true. Because it's still very, 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 very murky. Okay, so after the Northern Rift opens, after, Ember and Randall are deposited into Prithian,
after Ember and Randall are ransomed without their knowledge or consent.
And we finally come into, as always, the very stressful last 200 pages of any Sarah J. Maas book, and we get the great the great battle.
Not the grape battle.
But it was it had grapes and raisins to me.
Roses and thorns,
and
Isabel.
roses and thorns. So, okay, the first rose to me with the grape battle.
Every rose has its thorn. You're the rock and roll girl. This should be easy for you.
Seeing everyone take the antidotes to the parasite, which we actually haven't mentioned yet, in the water. Ick, ew, gross. Seeing that stifled and everybody come into their elemental powers.
That was very fun.
Sick.
That was very
So
fun for me to
cool.
read. I loved it. There was a tiny little voice in the back of my head that was like, are you sure this isn't cheesy? And I was like, stop. No, I reject you. It was so fun. Watching everyone level up like that was so fun. I'm going to backtrack a little bit again because I cannot miss an opportunity to talk about Rune and Lydia.
Of course.
And how amazing they are. When we
was
found
the
out
branding that was an issue for you because it was the same thing as the hologram? If they called it like an element of magic that the Asteria put in the water rather than a parasite, do you think it would have been different?
No, I just had trouble following it. Like I was, because they were talking about the drop, right? There was the tithe in Prithian.
Which we haven't mentioned.
And that to me, like, totally related. I was like, oh, okay. They rebranded the tithe in Midgard and made it the drop. I was confused on the first read about how the parasite I thought the parasite was like an ingredient that fueled the drop. I don't know. If you're not reading slowly and carefully, it becomes very confusing.
And once you just accept it for a truth, then it's like you can move on.
And it's fine. Right. And I actually don't really have a problem with it. But the final great battle sequence for me, there's like two things going on, right? Because you've got Bryce and Hunt and the armies of hell outside taking on the Asteri's armies. And then inside, you've got Rune and Lydia searching for her sons who are being held by Pollux.
Oh my God, it was so stressful.
Which is terrifying and horrible. And once again, even though this is not a story that's supposed to be focused solely on Rune and Lydia, I was like, I know how things are going to go eventually in the battle outside. I need to know what's going on with Rune and Lydia.
For me, one of the hottest moments to read, but also a rose.
And for the record, I did not know because there were like no spoilers or anything. It's just like, it's an SJM book.
This was the first like completely
organic. It's an SJM
organic
book, and we all read Akawar, and we all know that
this was the first organic read you've had without being able to spoil it for yourself.
That's true. And it was very stressful. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't like it. But we all read Akawar, okay? So I kind of expected it to follow the formula where one of them was going to die and then not.
Yeah.
So I was just very, again, I was very like, okay. You guys are doing your battle, and that's very exciting. But like, I needed to be.
So one of my favorite moments
to know what was going on
in that Rune and Lydia sequence, and a rose for me, even though it was one of the hottest things to read, was when
oh my God, I know. I think I know.
Was when he shot her in the leg.
Oh, and she's so mad.
And she is so mad, and she is like, I will never forgive you for this. And he's like, you're my mate. I don't like, this is what I need to do to save you and save your sons. And he does it anyway. A little bit of Reese energy making the decisions for the greater good without the consent of others. Let's just acknowledge that.
I'm calling myself out for being inconsistent because I'm totally okay with it.
So let's just acknowledge that right now, and then we'll move on. That we are not holding all characters to the same standard. Whatever. We're allowed to have feelings. But that was
irrational feelings.
And she forgives him in the end. Of course she does, because it was the right thing to do, and he did make the right decision.
And at the time, she wouldn't have made it anyway.
No, she would have died.
And so, and then Therion arriving with the antidote. The one cool thing Therion does in the entire series, I will say, once he took the antidote and his powers leveled up,
we were a little less annoyed at him.
Cool. I was like, damn. But it was more just about like mer people in general. I was just like, damn, mer people are kind of bad. Like
sick, yeah.
They're kind of sick. And so when he shows up, but then like, so you have this one moment of like, wow, mer people are so cool. And then Therion's like, hey, I had all these antidotes, but now I only have 2. Because Hypaxia told me.
Because he had one job.
And Hypaxia told me not to jostle it or drop it. And guess what I did?
Both.
Yeah. Thankfully, he had one for Lydia and one for Rune. So that works out well.
Yeah.
But this leads us to my second biggest rose for the entire book.
this might have been the rose. Because it involved Rune and Lydia.
It
really,
does.
Lydia.
It really does.
Singularly.
It really does. And
I will never forget reading the line that Lydia always knew she had been pure power. Even in her state where she had this parasite, whatever it was, even knowing that she had that amount of power while being oppressed by the physical, ramifications of whatever it was that the Asteri did to the water. Mm-hmm. And she knew she was that powerful, and finally coming into that.
When I read on the depth charger, the one time she said her son Bran's full name, which was Brannon.
Your little antenna went up?
My antenna went up, and I was like, SJM has never given two characters the same names before. Ever.
Named after an ancient.
But again, but we don't know. We don't know that until the end. It was literally just his name, Brannon and Actaeon. And again, the focus of that conversation was on something else.
Very cleverly, might we add.
She wasn't like dramatically revealing the names of her children.
Yeah,
it was in a different conversation.
It was an offhanded comment.
I actually don't even know if Lydia's the one who said the names. I think it may have been the Ocean Queen or one of their dads or the teachers or something. And I read it and I perked up and then I thought, no. No. You can't. I was like, don't work yourself up. Don't
disappoint
do
yourself.
Just don't do it. Just let it go. SJM is throwing, because again, from the beginning, leading up to this, I was like, I'm not going down that road. I'm not allowing myself to get worked up about a Throne of Glass third crossover. I'm just not going there.
And it was so perfect.
And then at the end, when she comes into her power and she says, Brannon, something, I was so overwhelmed reading it, I can't even remember it now. But she says an ancient bloodline.
Yeah. From an ancient bloodline from when they had originally,
of the
from
original
a different
world. And I was like, and it was at this point, everyone, that I feel I should share.
I feel I should share what actually happened. We were on opposite ends of my sofa.
It was one of the last few moments where I was slightly ahead of Isabel in the read.
And a blood-curdling
shriek, I think is the word I would use,
erupted from Jessica, and she leapt up from the sofa, sprinted into my room, threw herself on my bed
and
in
remained
the most
there
dramatic fashion, and then actually remained there for about 30 seconds screaming, came back out, started bouncing up and down going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, and then threw herself again back onto the bed. And I was just going, oh my god, I am not there where you are. And then 5 minutes later, I had the same reaction and was like, oh my god. And so then we both jumped up and down and screamed for a few minutes before we had to continue reading.
And that was the biggest reaction we had to anything in the book.
Oh my god.
Anything in the book.
When we say pure, unadulterated joy, that moment is what we are talking about.
It was incredible. And I think it made it even better that I had just kind of like shut it down and I wasn't even entertaining
You didn't think it was going to happen
that,
at
and
all.
I didn't think it was going to happen, and I was fine with it. I was like really kind of afraid of any of that happening, but the way that it happened was so perfect. And to see to see Lydia manifest Brannon and Mala's power.
So cool. It was so cool.
And so she and Aelin really are, like, not to be cheesy, but they are kind of twin flames.
Oh my god, I love it.
Except for the fact that Lydia has golden eyes like somebody else we know of which lineage. Manon.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I'm not saying anything else. I'm not even going to waste my breath on conjecture because if our prediction tally taught us anything, it's that we should stick to what we know.
But it was, again, it was what we talked about earlier in this episode, which was, it was such a perfect homage to the Throne of Glass world. It was a beautiful crossover without overdoing it.
And for her to choose Brannon as the character that puts it together for us and not any of the main characters in Throne of Glass was perfect.
I loved it.
It was perfect because if you're not a deep, tog, girly, that doesn't mean anything to you.
So we actually, when we finish this book, we have a number of friends who are reading Crescent City for the first time or Throne of Glass for the first time, and
they're working their way through Throne of Glass.
There were a couple of people who had gotten to about to read the third book in the Crescent City series, and we said, halt. You actually, so sorry, but really, like, you're welcome. But like, really, you have to read all of Throne of Glass. You have to finish
Throne of Glass
before you can read. And I'm sure, and you know what? HOFAS, it's still an incredible read. If you haven't read Throne of Glass, you don't actually need it, but it makes the experience, I would say, probably like 20% richer.
Lydia's full character reveal does not hit the same if you have not read Throne of Glass.
And like those moments where she references or like that world from Aurelia
Fae coming through,
like it's just not the same.
And that little nugget about the Fae that came through from Aurelia seemed like they knew Rigulus. They already served him,
which we still don't understand
which
fully.
Opens a whole nother book of questions for us. We had a lot of fun discussing even like those tiny little details. What does this mean for that world?
And you don't get
do we
that
think this happened? And so that was a ton of fun. And if you haven't read Throne of Glass, if you are not a deep, tall girly like we and many of us are, those moments just don't have the weight.
Totally.
And truly, those moments were some of my favorite roses. And the Lydia reveal in particular. And just seeing her be so badass with her flame was incredible. And
did she melt? Did she melt Morven? No, not Morven.
I believe.
Who's the bloodhound? Evil, what's his face?
Danica's dad.
Yeah.
Danica's sire.
God, begins with an M. Mordok. Burning him from the inside out.
Incredible.
Also, Pollux had a good death. Kind of wish that it had been a little more graphic, but it's fine. Anyway, all those roses in the final battle sequence. Now, I think we should, because we are running low on time.
We are pressed for time.
I think that we should discuss.
We've actually very overextended.
Yes, we, in fact, our first prediction was wrong. We are over 2 hours.
Amazing. I'm going to throw a very quick shout out, a little personal bouquet of roses to Hypaxia, because she is the new head of House of Flame and Shadow. Love that for her.
Love it.
Hate that her witches revolted against her. That was dumb. And I also just so much we would never have had if she wasn't also like, you know, a woman in STEM.
Totally. Yes, women in STEM.
And engineering. Once again, another groundbreaking antidote.
Yeah, and we haven't fully got to appreciate. We just don't have time because I think
we don't have time.
As great as it was, it wasn't one of like the pillars of the story. I feel like the whole sequence with the Underking and defeating him, it was very exciting.
Hypaxia, though, served a very similar role that like Declan served in House of Earth and Blood, where we would have never gotten the incredible ending sequence that we got without him being there to be able to broadcast everything and having that whole setup. Yeah. We would never have gotten all those amazing leveling up moments if it weren't for, and we wouldn't have gotten Ethan with the wolves if it were not for Hypaxia being there and us knowing, like, we don't question her, right? No. At that point, we don't question her ability. We know she's brilliant. We know she's an amazing med witch. We know she can accomplish things that no other character in her field could ever accomplish. And so it's not forced. And it's not cheesy. And she delivers this key element.
Yeah, no, important shout out.
And so I'm just going to throw her a whole little bouquet of roses all by herself. Okay.
So I think very impressive. Well done.
I just did that really fast.
Really fast. So the thorns, not raisins, in conjunction with the roses during the great battle at the end. Mm-hmm. Things that we found tough. And we won't go too far into them, but space was hard for me. Space was tough.
Her Bryce floating in space, the black holes, that was just tough for me. A very similar note to the nitpicking of the use of the word hologram.
Yeah.
It just felt a little out of place.
It was a little worse for me.
It was a
space than the hologram.
It felt way more sci-fi. Like, I understand this is a little bit of a blend of fantasy and sci-fi, but like the black hole and space felt like way
it
over
felt like
into
a
sci-fi.
Stretch for me, even for a fantasy novel.
I agree,
given the context of what we've experienced up to this point,
especially given like the mech space suit.
The mech suits didn't bother me as much. It was the floating characters in space that were tough.
It was like giving Leia Organa in. Was it Star Wars 8?
It was Star Wars.
It was either 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the scene we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even actually Carrie Fisher because she had already passed. Mm-hmm. May she rest in peace.
Eternal peace.
And they had like used CGI to have her floating in space, and then she somehow still managed to use the Force to float herself back into the ship. It was
very bizarre.
It was not great. And that was all I could think about when I was reading this scene. I was like, ugh.
Yeah, and like just adding on to that, it didn't bother me as much, but I hear your point. The Shah addition to that.
So Hunt had to get in a mech suit to go into the black hole to get Bryce to rescue her from space because Bryce doesn't have the Force. And it
didn't bother me as much.
I just felt like it was unnecessary.
I liked that he finally got closure because I feel like Shah has been referenced a lot in these two books.
I'll concede this, Thorn. You're making good points. In the moment when I read it, I was annoyed. Like, this bitch.
Still, and I think it's similar to what you said before. We had built up what we thought was going to be true about her in our I actually really thought that Shah was not good. And you, I think, still believe that to an extent. I don't. I do believe she was part of the rebellion. I don't think that she was ever anything compared to what Bryce is and what she stands for in this rebellion. But I think that
she is to Hunt.
You never forget your first love. And I think that Hunt needed that closure. And I'm happy that he got it.
I hear what you're saying. I do concede. This is not a hill I'm going to die on. But I think it folds back into my larger thorn, which is that I just don't feel like Hunt's journey really got the time
it deserved.
That I feel it deserved.
And I agree with you on that.
Because you're right. You make a very good point. That is closure that he needed. He grappled with that through both books.
Yeah.
He referenced a lot the struggle that he still grappled with those memories and with those feelings, and he didn't know what to do with them or what it made him. And I'm hearing what you're saying, and I agree. I do think that was Sarah's way of bringing that to a close. So my larger overarching note is that I just wish there had been a little more care and a little more time dedicated
in how she
to
did it.
Hunt's journey. I did not feel like this book was about Hunt's journey. And in that interview, she really made it seem like that's what this book was going to be focused on.
And I agree with you on that point.
And it just wasn't. That's not what this was.
I concede that, and I am with you. I thought we were going to get more of him, more of that self-discovery that we've come to love with how she portrays her female characters so much. And she hasn't really done the same thing with a male character yet. And I was hoping it would be with Hunt, and we didn't quite get that.
Maybe it'll be with Azrael.
Because like you said earlier, this is going to be the first time we probably get a predominantly
majority male-focused
POV
book.
So,
which I'm excited about. I think it's going to be good.
Let's hope.
Think that oh gosh, we have 2 more roses to give out.
Okay, but that quick. And it's quick, massive fucking shout out to that scene with Jessica and Bryce.
I wept.
It was actually the only cry. You mentioned that yesterday.
I do think it was actually the only cry. I was far too stressed in all of the other scenes to cry.
Totally. It was beautiful.
I was far too stressed in all the other scenes to cry, and I think one of the reasons I really cried during this scene was because I realized that it was all of the stress was done, and it was just a big release,
and we got to enjoy that moment because we knew that the big bad is done, at least for now, and we actually get to enjoy this reunion between Bryce and Jessica. And I loved the point that you made when we were discussing this earlier, which was this book this whole series started with those two. It didn't end with them, but it was definitely a closing chapter. Those two.
I mean, we know that the very first scene SJM ever envisioned from the Crescent City series was Bryce and Danica when Bryce makes the drop. But besides Danica, when we start this series, and especially in those years after Danica's death, Jessica was kind of Bryce's anchor to the world.
Yeah.
Her job was really the only thing that made her get out of bed every day.
Yeah.
And I think Jessica was really watching over her in a big way there. And Bryce never really realized it. And I don't think we ever really realized it either, but I think she always cared, and not just because of what I do think Jessica knew the truth of,
for
Bryce's
sure.
power. But I think Jasiba cared about her as a person. And honestly, finding out that Jasiba was a human priestess
Loved that.
was
I loved
an
that.
incredible. I'm so happy that is what we learned about her character. It's never what I would have guessed.
And you know what I loved? Also, what I
but
would
I
never
thought
have
it was
guessed?
really beautiful.
That my one cry in this book and like my moment of like the most poignant feelings, that it was a moment that involved Jasiba, which
I know.
never, because she was always very kind of cold and she
Never gave us feels. She gave us like chills and like, oh my God, she's so badass.
Like,
but
ooh,
she
what is
never
she
gave
going to
us,
reveal
like,
in the next book? It was masterfully done by Sarah J.
No,
Maas.
it was.
That last scene. And I have no notes for that scene.
No, it was
say.
beautiful. It was moving. It was
giving Harry and Dumbledore on the platform.
It was
in
giving
King's
Harry
Cross.
and Dumbledore. Thankfully, there was not a weird, bloody
Voldemort.
fetus version of Voldemort. But no, to see Bryce and Jessica have that moment, and knowing too, Jessica having been human through all of that, and she knew how much Bryce cared about the lowest. And knowing now what that must have meant to Jessica, to watch this young woman sort of grow under your watch into the savior of the smallest, weakest people, the people you tried to fight for 15,000 years ago and failed, to see this person save them and deliver them from what you could not. And what better end could Jessica ever have wanted than to be able to give Bryce life in that world.
And I also just
with her
loved,
love, and it was just so beautiful.
It was great.
And also to give Bryce the chance to see that,
oh my God, yes, that she was going to be
Danica
okay in the afterlife.
and the pack of devil, that everything she believed about the afterlife wasn't true.
Yeah.
And it reminded me actually of a scene from Lord of the Rings. I think it might be in the extended edition of Return of the King. Gandalf, where Pippin is saying, I didn't think it would end like this.
Yeah, so it was when they're in the Battle of Minas Tirith, and
Gandalf is comforting him, and
the Witch King is about to come.
And Gandalf is saying, it's not, he's like, this isn't the end.
Yeah.
You see, the light rolls
God,
back.
Jessica, I'm getting emotional.
And you see, white shores and green and beyond.
Shout out to Enya.
And it just really reading the scene where Bryce looks over and sees and knows that she's seeing Danica and Connor.
Yeah.
And Jasiba in this place, and knowing not only that they are at peace, but that she also someday will get an eternal rest.
It was so important for us to get that, because we didn't really get it in Sky and Breath. We thought we had it
at the end of Earth and Blood, and then it got kind of like.
But we did get like a really heavy hitting emotion. I mean, we have the screenshots to prove our reactions to the end of Earth and Blood. Mm-hmm. Now in Sky and Breath, we didn't have the same. There was like a really lovely moment where Cormac sacrificed himself for the cause, and that was really special. But it didn't have the same, like this.
No, the end of Sky and Breath was just raw and stressful and chaotic.
We got all of that raw, stressful, chaotic energy, and we also got this really poignant moment, and it felt good to have that, since I feel like we didn't fully get that in Sky and Breath.
Yeah.
Now, another grape for me. We're coming to the end of the grapes here.
Oh my God.
Or the roses.
Isabel.
Roses. Love that we got the Pegasus horses again. It was so great to see the winged horses.
But also there was so much discussion of Pegasus, and not nary a mention
of Helion.
Just gonna throw it out there. So that's my only
loved
note.
that. And you know what? Another rose for me. Even though it was hard, because you never want to see someone exist without their mate, because you can't even imagine. And SJM has just done a brilliant job of portraying what that means to exist with or without your mate. Mm-hmm. I really thought that because Baxion's mate was dead, that she was going to have him be the character that was killed off. And she didn't do that. And so I both love and hate that, because I love it. I wasn't expecting it. He ended up being one of my favorites. He's fucking rallied. He rallied. He was with it with Rune and Hunt in it. And they ended up trusting him implicitly. and didn't even question. Like, that was a relationship now that is going to be forged for the
and
end of their days.
he was doing it all for Danica.
Exactly.
Because
so we had that.
He was doing what I think he believed Danica would have done.
So I loved that.
It's beautiful,
Again,
but it's also
it was so hard because
and sad.
And because we have such vivid, incredible descriptions of what it means to be in love with your mate throughout the rest of The Mass of Us, it's almost like you wish that he didn't have to live that way because he doesn't have her.
I do. I feel like Baxian should have died some kind of noble
So it's
death.
twofold because I feel like that would have been the obvious thing to do. He would have been the obvious character to kill off. Onefold. It would have been the logical thing to do because people kind of critique Sarah sometimes for not killing off her main character. We know that at the end of the day they're going to be okay, and I actually love that. And if it was going to be anyone, I would have expected it to be him, and it wasn't, and I kind of enjoyed that surprise. So that was a rose for me.
I think that brings us to the end of our roses and thorns.
Yeah. Final thoughts.
Our grapes and raisins.
Grapes and raisins, peaks and valleys. I walked away with this, and I'm glad that we waited a month to film it because I understand that I was in such a state of just pure elation after reading it. I definitely did think about it and have like notes that I wouldn't have had if we had filmed it 2 days afterwards. At the same time, I wouldn't change it for the world. Like, I enjoyed all of it. As irritated as I was at certain parts of it, I think that it's great to be annoyed at the characters that you love. It means that they're organic and that they're human, which they're not, but like
they're relatable. It makes them relatable.
Exactly. And so it was so fun. I haven't experienced a read like that since the end of Harry Potter. It was awesome. I gave it 5 stars. I enjoyed every single moment, and I will read it again and again probably, and probably come out with something new every time.
I'm definitely going to read it again and again for sure. Yeah. It was exhilarating, a core memory. Like reading it with you, but
that was so special.
To your point, I have not like a book release like this.
I know, I haven't felt that.
Hasn't
so
happened
long.
since the Deathly Hallows. I have not been on the edge of my seat like this for a book since I was a child.
Yeah.
And to experience that kind of childlike joy, that unadulterated, uninhibited, reckless abandon joy is an experience that you very rarely get as an adult.
You don't.
I was going to use the word grown up, but I don't want to call us that. Like, as an adult, you know, we don't really get to exist in that state of being very often, hardly ever. And for that reason alone, this book is so, and will always be so special to me.
I like to think that we've also read it in a somewhat more enlightened state than I've ever read any other book before, and therefore the notes that we both have about it, I actually almost embrace them. As much as I loved it, I can be annoyed at it and still love it at the same time.
And we know that there's more to come
Exactly.
too, which is also an interesting place to be in.
Yeah.
Right? As a fan, as a reader, and as someone who is kind of also a study of.
I mean, we spent a lot of time analyzing these.
I do feel like I could give at least one lecture on the exhaustive works of Sarah J. Maas. So it feels like a very unique, enlightened experience to go through and reading all of her works, and now looking forward.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that we've gotten over this hurdle because this was the first time we've been waiting with bated breath. Because by the time we finished ACOTAR, Silver Flames had already been out.
Totally.
And actually, Sky and Breath had just come out, but we hadn't even started Crescent City, so we didn't have to sit around and wait for that.
Real release.
And then we read all the way through Throne of Glass. And so for the last 2 years, we've just been waiting for something new from her. And I'm kind of glad that first experience of that is done.
And also together.
And we did it together. And I'm really excited to see what she does with the rest of it. We know that she also, congratulations to Sarah. You're
international bestseller, domestic bestseller.
I mean,
killing it.
Hats off to you. PBS is doing specials on Romantasy now.
Amazing.
Marketplace podcast featured a spot about the Romantasy genre. That shit doesn't happen without her.
And I think we made this point near the beginning of our season 1. To this date, I have not read another book or series in this romantasy genre that is written with the same it's a caliber above anything else I've read in this
It really
genre.
is. It is high fantasy with also rich romance.
Yeah.
But they are high fantasy worlds that
well
have
written.
lore and law and history and culture and languages. It is a masterpiece. And she is elevating this genre. I mean, like, we started this podcast originally just because we do love this genre, but our love for this genre was reinvigorated because we found her books.
Totally.
And what she is doing for this genre
is huge.
Is monumental. I mean, again,
people are finally taking it seriously.
I cannot overstate this. PBS is doing a segment on this new genre, right? I mean, that's journalism.
It's a big deal. And it wouldn't have happened with anyone else.
She is moving the needle, and rightly so. And there is so much more to come from her. You can tell from her interviews during this press tour
that she has ideas and she has things in store for us.
You know what? And knowing she's a Swiftie, I'm gonna go ahead and say this, lest we should be so like humbled that she would ever stumble across this podcast. But like the moment that Taylor Swift is having in her career right now, I kind of feel like Sarah is
on the brink of
either there or like really on her way to it. I mean, people just cannot get enough, and it's growing with every day. It's growing, and I'm so excited for what comes next. In particular, Azriel's book, and I think we just have to leave it at that.
I think so too. We undershot this by 30%, and it is time to end it. So with that, thank you guys so much. If you are still with us,
you guys are the real.
Yeah, and we love you. We love Sarah. We love the books.
And Lydia.
And Lydia.
And Lydia and Rune especially. Okay, bye.
Okay, goodbye.